Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 293, Adesanya versus Strickland. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. G'day, Keith. How you doing?
Nice job, man.
Yeah. That was like the weakest Australian greeting ever, but you know.
I used to be a waiter at Outback Steakhouse back in the day, so I don't know if that counts. I know what a bloke is from the sign on the door.
The bathrooms, yeah, the Sheilas and the blokes bathrooms. I remember that too. And now I want a Bloomin Onion. All right. The UFC's little brief September global tour continues. They are in Paris this weekend. They were in Singapore last weekend. They're in Sydney, Australia this coming weekend with a 12-fight card. Now, due to unusual circumstances, we're actually recording this on Wednesday night of the week before fight week. We've gotten into the pattern where, if at all possible, we talk on Sunday so that we're going the very last minute possible so that I can get the post-production done and get it out there for our legions, well, hundreds of fans for Monday morning. Here we're given the fates, the chaos of the universe, a full 4 extra days to go to work on this card. So here's my question for you, Keith. There are 12 fights on this card right now that we're about to preview in the next 2.5 hours. How many of these fights will make it to the cage in Sydney next Saturday intact?
1. 10.
10 to 12? I think that's fair. I mean, we lost 2 fights off the Paris card within 8 hours of when we finished the preview last time. I could kick myself because they were ones featuring less proven fighters, ones that I needed more tape study for. Sure. So it was a disproportionate amount of my work that went down the drain as they smashed the remains of those 2 fights together and just slapped them. So hopefully we only lose 2. I won't put you on the spot and ask you which 2 you would want to lose if you could choose. But wherever he is right now, Tyson Pedro's ears just turned red.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. Oh, my Lord.
It's incidental and fortuitous that we're talking about this card because you just finished telling me a story about your daughter in which she, very much like Israel Adesanya, wiped out a side of girl softball players and said, other girls, hope and pray, I aim and fire, and then she did like a machine gun thing with her hands. Very unsporting. I'm kind of surprised to see that out of the young lady.
It was weird when she high kicked somebody. It was
None of that is true.
I was disappointed and happy at the same time. Like, wow, the technique was pretty good, though.
If she hadn't had the helmet on, she would have knocked her clean out. Oh, man. Any general thoughts about this card? I mean, it's 12 fights. There's a lot of Australians and New Zealanders on it. How do you feel about the quality in advance?
I don't. Like, for a pay-per-view, this is weak. I mean, the main event, it is what it is. Like, I get it. Sean Strickland's up next. The Dricus du Plessis fight fell through. That didn't happen on Dricus' side, and Strickland's the next one. And Strickland can talk himself. Like, he can talk this fight up and sell some tickets, but Strickland's one of these guys with the personality. I never really liked it. There's some things are witty, but a lot of it is unnecessary. It's a little. It's not Kobe Covington, but like some things Kobe Covington is pretty witty, and some things you're like, oh, it's a little too much.
Yeah.
I kind of feel the same way, but it seems even more with Strickland. Like, but I might change my mind come the press conference and them going at it. That might sell me, but the rest of the card, I mean. Tuivasa versus Volkov to me feels like third from the top, second fight of the pay-per-view, not co-main event. So the rest of the main card is god awful.
And I completely agree. And Tuivasa versus Volkov sounds more like the co-main event of like a free fight night card to me. And I mentioned there are plenty of Australian and New Zealander fighters on this card. Several of them are in matchups that are clearly designed to try and bring a little joy to the fans in Sydney. I'm not calling them complete squash matches, but there are some people that have been summoned out of their glass coffins or signed for the specific purpose of fighting an Australian fighter. And in some cases, we'll get to that fight when we get to it, but the UFC tried as hard as it could to find somebody that Blood Diamond has a decent chance of beating. And I'll spoil it for you. I won't even ask. The dude they found is still a big favorite over Blood Diamond.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Not many people that he'd be favorite of. I don't know if my phone is going to ring one of these days. I want to give the UFC like a little bit of a pass because
Keith, do you have a passport, and how quickly could you make 170?
Maybe UFC 393. Maybe I could make it. Maybe. He said he'll fight at heavyweight. Oh yeah, I forgot I have something going on that day. I'm sorry, I already had plans. I'll give the UFC some kind of pass because there is this fights that fell through like are all like bigger fights. Kiefer France, getting hurt, ruined one of probably the best fight on paper.
Kiefer France versus Manel Kape was fantastic.
And then I know Casey O'Neill versus Viviana Araujo was supposed to be on this card. That would have been another good one. That one seems to me like a pay-per-view card, type fight, like second fight or the opener or something like that. So there's two fights that hurt. But when I look at this card, it feels to me like when I look at I don't know, you probably do this. I'm sure a lot of our listeners do this. Like every once in a while for fun, I just start scrolling through Fight Finder and what's coming up, and I start going through and I start predicting fights way ahead months from now. Like, see, it feels like I got to this card and it's like incomplete. Like it's not finished yet. Like it's still waiting for this. They're working on this title fight that's going to be added to this card, and then there's like another big fight. So that just feels like to me. It's like oh okay, it's not complete yet.
That's a good way of putting it. Like if you had told me, oh yeah, Grasso versus Shevchenko 2 was supposed to be the co-main event of this, but blah, blah, blah happened and they had to bump it, then all of a sudden it all makes sense and it falls into place.
Yeah. Which, by the way, why isn't that fight on this card? Why is it on like a fight night? Like
one of the weird ones, the one where it's a free fight night card, but they are putting it in T-Mobile Arena. It's strange. I do not have.
I mean, I get you don't want a title fight. I'm sure there's something behind the scenes that we don't know about, but let's not go too far. We got a lot of fights to talk about. So
we do. Shall we dig into these?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We have a battle of debuting welterweights as Kevin Jousset takes on Kiefer Crosbie. Jousset, the 30-year-old New Zealander, though born in France, so I guess he could have fought last weekend at UFC Paris as well. He is 8-2 overall. He will be making his UFC debut, as I mentioned, but he comes in on a 3-fight win streak and as the reigning Hex Fight Series welterweight champ. He'll be looking to make good on that debut against Crosbie. 33-year-old Irishman is 10-3 overall. He comes in on a 2-fight win streak, including in his last appearance on April Fool's Day, but I am being serious, a first-round knockout of UFC veteran Alex Oliveira. Odds here are extremely close. It is an actual pick'em where neither fighter is available at plus money right now. Jousset is around minus 115, Crosbie around minus 105 on most of your books. I have no idea whether that line's gonna move. You already kind of said it. This one is rough, and I'm not sure why. Jousset, I like I said, born in France. He's been training out of like living in Australia, training out in New Zealand for basically his entire career. All of his, he only turned pro like 4 years ago. He has 10 fights. They've all been in Australia and New Zealand. I do like that he's been busy. He's had 4 fights in like the last 12 or 13 months. That's always good, especially when you're a 30-year-old rookie, basically. You're making up for lost time in terms of your actual cage time. He's a kickboxer. He's a city kickboxing guy, orthodox. He throws a good hard one too. He has good low kicks, but he's not great, man. He's defensively porous. He's not fast. He backs straight up. He's super hittable. In his last fight where he defended his Hex Fight Series title, a less heralded striker was just teeing off on him. He ended up winning the fight with his wrestling of all things. Took the guy down a couple times, including in the third round where he ended up getting the finish. There's not even, I don't even see like blood diamond upside to this guy where, okay, if they find the right guys for this guy to fight, it'll be like a dollar store version of Michael Venom Page, where he'll do spectacular things if you get him in the cage with the right guy. And maybe like Page, he'll actually turn into a good balanced mixed martial artist as, he gets more fights. I don't even see that for him. Luckily for him, he's taken on Crosbie. As soon as this fight was announced, or as soon as we were, a little ways up the road from it, I'm like, okay, time to get ready for this. I'm like, why is that name familiar? Kiefer Crosbie. Oh, he was that guy in Bellator that got complete game run on him by Georgi Karahanyan just like 2 years ago. My first thought was that must have been like 5 years ago, but no, it was summer 2021, where fair play to him. He was getting Karahanyan pretty good on the feet, but as soon as the thing went to the ground, Karahanyan all of a sudden looked like the second coming of Damian Maia, just speedy, effortless back take, and arm triangled him in in the first round. He's Irish, and he's got kind of he's an SPG Ireland guy. He's got kind of the big, brash Irish prospect personality. He's got a certain amount of notoriety outside of the cage and ring. He's been doing exhibition boxing bouts with people like Aaron Chalmers, who is, of course, a British mixed martial artist who was primarily famous as a reality TV star before that. In the cage, he's a southpaw boxer by preference. Like I say, he's been doing actual boxing. He's a boxer by preference, but he actually throws good kicks to all levels. I was impressed just how good his low kick was. He doesn't throw many of your kind of traditional round kicks to the body, but throws a nice push kick right up the middle. He was willing to go upstairs on the opponents I saw him fight against. Good power, not one shot kill power, but kind of the I hate saying Dustin Poirier power, because this guy is not even the dime store version of Dustin Poirier, but where, if the bullets are flying, it's clear that his shots are having more effect than the other guys. So kind of, underrated power, the kind of power that would probably allow him to build as a fight goes along. I guess technically Crosbie is the slightest of underdogs here, but as I said, it's a true pick 'em right now. But I'm not super high on either of these guys, but I like Crosbie as a guy that I think is going to be the bigger, stronger guy in the cage, even if he was fighting at lightweight as recently as 2 years ago, and has a little more power and just has better fundamentals. I just didn't like what I saw out of Kevin Jousset. It was just too easy to back that guy up into the cage and tag him up. And that's what I'm picking Crosbie to do here. Give me Kiefer Crosbie by second round TKO, and it'll be off to a quiet start in Sydney on Saturday.
Yeah. These I don't think this would be a good contender series matchup. Like this is
No.
not, the both guys are older guys. They're not very talented. Kiefer Crosbie, he's a minus athlete who's a kickboxer that fights out of both stance, likes to get down in the pocket, works the body pretty well. Has some pop in his hand, but you talk about hittable. Jousset is. Crosby is also very hittable. Yeah, he has this high guard defense, but he makes a mistake of backing straight up on the center line. I go back to like the Charlie Leary fight. He hated the pressure from Charlie Leary. That was beating him. He's been rocked a bunch of times. He did beat up Alex Oliveira in the clinch, so I like that. Does have a kicking game. You're a little higher in his kicking game than I am, but he can sneak a takedown, but he definitely isn't a wrestler. What I'm concerned about, he's gassed out a lot. Kiefer Crosbie looks like a guy that would be good. Like he looks like a guy that if you didn't know anything about MMA and the guy, you saw a guy at a bar, you'd be like, and so it's like, oh, that's an MMA fight. You'd be like, yeah, of course he is. Like he looks like a big meathead, and I don't mean that as an insult.
No. Well, the insult part is where you say now that he's actually not good.
yeah. Jousset looks like Jousset looks like he's jacked up too. He looks like a pro wrestler, but the pro wrestler that definitely would not be like a headliner. Like you look at him, you're like, all right, yeah, you can be a tag team guy. Like, oh, your last name's Jousset. Okay, like he could be one of those Rougeau brothers. Remember those guys? like you don't have top of the headline thing, but yeah, okay. When we're watching the Royal Rumble and me and my friends, we used to do like a little lottery back in the day.
Ooh.
Yeah, we'd all like throw like $10, which was like a lot of money back then, and it'd be like, I don't know, 6 of us. We'd randomly pull numbers out of a hat, and you get like 5 numbers. If your guy won, you'd get like, you pull out a hat, and you're like, oh, number 7, and I get number 7. Number 7 come out, like, oh, that's my guy, and all of a sudden, like Kevin Jousset runs out, and you're like, he ain't gonna win. Like, he's not gonna win. It's gonna be Bret Hart, Undertaker, Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels. Those guys are gonna win it, not freaking Jousset. Like, oh, there's a waste of time. My next one, oh, I got Virgil. Great. Oh, my next one, I got the Warlord. Fuck. Anyways.
Real quick, rest in peace, Terry Funk, who passed away at the age of, I believe, 74 or 79 terrible. This past week.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, but that's a pretty good run. But
I know there's another guy that just I don't follow this younger guy just died too. I don't know if you caught that, like a real young, like current wrestler or something. I don't watch the current. That's why I'm naming
all the wrestlers I can name are like 74 or 79 years old.
Yeah, that's why I'm naming the Warlord and Virgil, and right now, like half our listeners like, what the hell is he talking about for wrestling? And the other ones who like wrestling are like, who the hell are these guys? So he's a massive dude. He's long and lengthy. He's flat-footed. He's kind of stiff on the feet. Very basic boxing. He keeps things tight and inside. I like that he throws straight shots down the pipe, but a lot of times he's throwing single shots. You mentioned he lacks head movement. He's been cracked a lot, even in wins.
Yeah,
he keeps his chin high in the air. To his credit, he's pretty durable. Like he's got a hell of a beard on him. Like he gets cracked and it doesn't seem like rocked. He throws. I like his kicking game. Hard leg kicks. He's got a pretty good high kick. He can grind in the clinch. He's a big guy, physically strong. He gets in that Muay Thai plum clinch. He does some good work there. Dirty boxing, elbows inside, knees inside. He has a judo black belt. He can wrestle a little bit. Good top control. When he is on top, he'll stall though. Like he'll just hold on and not do much. When I've seen him actually let go of his hands on top, his ground and pound is pretty solid. But he's also like not the greatest defensive wrestler. So I'm with you. I don't like either one of these guys. But they're both minus athletes, pretty mediocre. You know what this one is? It's like, you start the Royal Rumble and it's like, all right, the first guy coming out is Bushwhacker Luke. And the second guy coming out is Tito Santana, and you're watching, you're like, all right. Well, number 3 come out already, and can it please be something exciting? That's what I feel like this is. So, can someone hit like Mr. Perfect's music or something and get someone to actually win this thing?
This is the part of the Royal Rumble where like Paul Roma and the Brooklyn Brawler are in
Brooklyn Brawler, like, oh great, we gotta wait another 2 minutes till someone and then what happens is you have like 8 of these jobbers come in, like 8 of them at once, and then all of a sudden like it's finally like some huge guy comes out and like Diesel comes out and he clears the entire cage, like everybody at once. Like there's 10 of them in it, he's just gonna walk in and it's gonna be 10 of them. He's gonna be waiting by himself. But then like the next guy come out is also gonna be like a massive star too. So like there's gonna be a showdown between like Diesel and Shawn Michaels. You gotta get all the rest of the guys out. Anyways, enough pro wrestling. I'm gonna go with Jousset. I'm just gonna say he's bigger, he's stronger. I'm gonna give me him by decision.
We now have a lightweight matchup as Jamie Mullarkey takes on John Makdessi. Mullarkey, the 29-year-old Australian, is 16-6 overall. He is 4-4 in the UFC. He is coming in off of a loss. He got knocked out in the second round by Muhammadjan Naimov at the Cara France versus Albazi card back in June. Prior to that, he had good back-to-back wins over Michael Johnson and Francisco Prado. So he'll be looking to get back on track here against the, frankly, kind of ageless Makdessi. 38-year-old Canadian is 18-8 overall. He is 11-8 in the UFC. He's been relatively active of late by his own standards. He's been kind of a one fight a year guy forever, but he last fought almost exactly a year ago. It was a unanimous decision loss to Nasrat Haqparast, whom we'll talk about a little bit later, at the Gane versus Tuivasa card in Paris. Odds here favor the younger man, favor the local man, as Mullarkey is minus 185, Makdessi plus 150. Keith, I'm definitely going to toss this one to you first. The lightweight division is such fast-moving waters, and John Makdessi is frankly so kind of nondescript that once he shows up every 12 to 15 months, he's always better than I remember him being.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I feel as though Jamie Mullarkey is kind of regressing to some sort of mean. I mean, he's literally 500 in the UFC right now. Who gets it done here? And what does the fight look like?
Yeah, this John Makdessi's 38, so I'm not gonna get too excited about him returning. To stay on the WWF theme, it reminds me of when like the WWF decides to bring like a star from like the 90s back, like in like 10 years after they last wrestled, and it doesn't get a pop at all. Like people have moved on. That's how I kind of feel like John Makdessi. Like also like, ladies and gentlemen, Tatanka, and you're like, like, dude, I was such a fan of him when I was in third grade. Now I'm in college. Like a guy pretending to be an Indian is like not that cool anymore.
Yeah. No, it's in fact, it's kind of the opposite of cool anymore. Like,
yeah.
Staged.
Yeah, I probably had trouble for saying.
Dude, I mean, we already talked about Virgil, where his whole shtick was like polishing Ted DiBiase's shoes and shit. It's like,
oh my God.
Even at the time, I was like, this is not, like, I'm like 12 and I'm like, this is not cool. Like, this is not.
No. So, let me give you some pull back the curtain a little bit. So, I mean, I've said this before on the show. This times, so we moved this up earlier because simply because of me. Like I had things that I had to do during the regular scheduled time, and you were very gracious to move the show up 4 days.
Sure.
Like, yeah, imagine you're in college and you're waiting for that big paper, and they're like, yeah, it's due, January 4th, and I'm like, it's actually, can you make it December 31st? And you're like, oh, sure. Okay.
So I'm running to the bookstore and I'm getting the Cliff's Notes for John Makdessi, like the Jamie Mullarkey for dummies. Like,
yeah, I would tell you something that I'd tell you something off the air, but I tell you something on the air, but they might take away my my degree if I told you what I was gonna say. So, anyways, what I was gonna say was, you got sometimes you have to sacrifice film study, and then when you move it up 4 days, you really got to sacrifice. I mean, like I've seen John Makdessi fight 19 times now, so I didn't do any film study on him. I don't even have notes on him. I just wing it off the top of my head with John Makdessi. I mean, he's always been a pretty good athlete. Like even at 38, I expect him to move better than Jamie Mullarkey. He's a counter striker who works behind a jab in his boxing. A bit of a point fighter, never been a much of a power hitter. But he's got fast kicks really everywhere, solid takedown defense. So I lied. I did look up one thing because I was like, man, he like, does John Makdessi ever wrestle? Like, I don't remember him ever wrestling. Then I looked it up. He doesn't have a single takedown in 19 UFC fights. Now that might be them not scoring takedowns correctly and stuff like that, but officially he doesn't have a single takedown in 19 UFC fights. Like, that's got to be a record. He's taking on Jamie Mullarkey. Mullarkey is also, not a great athlete, but he makes up for it with toughness. Not very fast. He's a classic builder that has great output. It's very controlled output, constantly taking ground, constantly pushing his opponent on their back foot. I go back to his aging now, but the Devontae Smith fight where he just beat him with volume. I thought he did the same with Faraz Zayem, who even though he lost, he's a limited athlete and he's got some defensive issues. So that's why he couldn't take like a freak like Jalen Turner. But other guys, you're not one of those genetic freaks. He's gonna give you a tough fight. I mean, he works behind a stiff jab, constantly like cutting angles and L stepping, so he's getting harder to hit. He's got some stinging power. I mean, knocked out Worthy, knocked out Devontae Smith. He likes to work the body. He aggressively he's so aggressive that it can be an issue because he'll run straight into perfectly placed punch. I mean, he did that against Namath in his last fight. And you do have to worry a little bit about his durability moving forward because, his game is so centered around his ability to eat shots. He's underrated wrestler, got some good entries. He changed together takedowns. He's also like unbreakable in his will to go for a takedown. Like even if you stop him, that he'll shoot 2, 3, 4 times. He's got some solid top control. He looked good against Prado from the top position. He'll just, if you get up, he's just going to work, and he's not frustrated. He'll work to get you right back down. And that's all about what he fights. He fights to break your will, and he has cardio to go the entire fight. I'm picking Mullarkey. He's bigger. He's more powerful. He's younger. He has better cardio. He's a better wrestler. It's in his home country or his side of the world. He's going to have the crowd on his side. I think we have a back and forth battle, but I think Mullarkey wins a very close contest. Give me Mullarkey by decision.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, this is taking place in Sydney, which is his home state.
Oh, even better.
He will be he should go over better than even.
Well, I don't know. Don't forget how popular John Mullarkey is.
John Makdessi? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, John Makdessi. See me, John.
Yeah.
Who the hell's John Mullarkey? Yeah. I'm even messing up my own jokes.
Yeah. They're going to get married in the cage at the end.
Yeah.
Not much I can add to that. Mullarkey, his persona as a fighter was established right from the very beginning, and it was established from before he got to the UFC. If you look at any of his fights on the regional scene, he's not one of those guys that was blowing people away with superior athleticism and aggression and then had to figure out how to merge into traffic when he got to the UFC. He was the lesser athlete even against those dudes, on the local scene in Australia. So it was a different kind of adjustment for him. And after the back-to-back wins over Worthy and Devontae Smith, he looked like a future top 10 guy. He was fighting bigger, faster fighters with much more power and either just taking him out like he did Worthy, or at least weathering the storm and taking over. And then he's had mixed results since. I think at best, Mullarkey pans out now as kind of an Australian Darren Elkins is kind of how I feel about him. He's going to have to walk through hell. Just about everybody he takes on is going to be more athletic and more skilled than him. But you mentioned he has underrated wrestling in terms of technique, and his persistence and cardio and pressure make it go. That sounds like Darren Elkins to me. I no longer think Mullarkey is probably a future top 15 guy. And in fact, the way his last 4 or 5 fights have gone, even going back to the win over Devontae Smith, I have the feeling that even though he's just 29 now, the wheels might start falling off sooner than later just because of the kind of punishment he takes. But even if I no longer think of him as having contender upside, I do still think he's proven that he belongs in the UFC until those wheels do fall off, and he's still a threat to kind of jump up and take out a more skilled fighter on any given night. He doesn't even have that to worry about with Makdessi. Makdessi, as you pointed out, is he's a good fighter, but he's a limited fighter, and he's become more limited as time has gone along. For a guy who has as many career knockouts as he does, none of them have been in like the last 5 or 6 years. Most of them were in regional shows in Canada. I think in 19 UFC fights, he only has like 2 or 3 knockouts in his 11 wins. Yeah, he's a guy that you said it, he has no offensive wrestling. And thinking back to his fights, I wonder if he even has a takedown attempt. He may not. That would have to be some kind of record. So he's kind of stuck as a slightly undersized, or at least undersized in the sense of being short, having short reach, and not really any one-shot power to redeem that. And he's a good athlete, but he's not an off-the-charts athlete. And at 38, even that should be slipping. He has the build that works at 155 if you're Michael Chandler, but he's more of an Artem Lobov, if I'm being totally honest. Give me Mullarkey to win here. And the only real question in my mind is whether Mullarkey will actually lose the first round that's kind of wild and back and forth, and then have to come back from that and take over and start wearing down Makdessi, or Mullarkey is just shown to be the better fighter from the beginning. Could be wrong about this one. I feel like I've been wrong about a lot of Makdessi's fights in the last 4 or 5 years, but give me Mullarkey here to win a decision, and I expect it's going to be a pretty straightforward one for him. We head now to the men's featherweight division for a matchup between Jack Jenkins and Jose Mariscal. Jenkins, the 30-year-old Australian, is 12-2 overall. He's 2-0 since joining the UFC out of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted with a unanimous decision win over Don Shainis, who I believe stepped up on short notice. That was back in February at UFC 284. He came back in June and took a split decision over Jamal Emmers. So Jenkins, despite entering the UFC to relatively little fanfare, is looking to rack up his 3rd straight win in one of the most competitive divisions in the organization. He'll have to get past Mariscal to do it. 30-year-old Chicago native is 14-6 with 1 no contest overall. He is 1-0 in the UFC since joining as a veteran of just about every top-level regional promotion in North America. Combate, LFA, CFFC, all of them. But he took on Trevor Peake at UFC on ABC Emmett versus Topuria back in June, picked up a unanimous decision. So he also is looking to stay spotless in the UFC. He is not favored to do so. Jenkins is minus 210 as your favorite. Mariscal plus 180 as the underdog. Keith, I feel like 3 fights into the card, we finally got into the first individual fighter, not even matchup, but just first individual fighter that I'm pretty excited about in Jack Jenkins. Tell me if you feel the same way, or I'm just too starved for excitement about anything on this card. And tell me what you think about this fight.
No, like I don't think these guys will be, title challengers or anything, but I think both guys are pretty good. I think this is a fun fight. Like this is I think it's better than some of the fights on the main card. I'll tell you that. Jack Jenkins, obviously the hometown guy. He's good. I mean, he can fight out of both stances, uses a lot of feints, especially leg feints, high volume striking. I love that he stalks his foe. He's one of these guys, he switches stances to not necessarily land from different angles, but to take ground in the range so he can land strikes. So he uses, almost like to close the distance. He cuts a lot of angles and shows a lot of good variety in his striking. Strong pocket boxing. I love that he works the body. He's got some hard kicks, crushing body kicks, great calf kicks. He's got a fast high kick. He loves switch kicks. He mixes punches and kicks together in combination well. He ends a lot of combos with kicks. He does defensively back up straight in the center line, which was in the best. But if you crash the pocket on him, he'll grab and battle in the clinch. He's got some mean knees inside. He also has some judo trips. I like his wrestling. He's a strong offensive wrestler, some fast entries, some strong top game. He does need to improve his top control a little bit. Like he lost some position on Don Shainis when they were fighting. But I like that he's busy on top. He looks to advance position, good ground and pound. I watched one where he was like stuck in an opponent's guard and he was just dropping those like Tito Ortiz elbows to open it up. Had 3 submission wins. Against Jamal Emmers, he did struggle to get off the bottom, but that's, Emmers is a pretty solid fighter himself. But really impressive was the pace that he was able to put on in against Shainis and against Emmers. He just didn't stop. Pepe Mariscal, he's good. He's got He's one of these guys. He was on the regional scene for a long time, and he gained some really good experience. I mean, you look at we said this about last time. We look at the organizations he fought in: LFA, Cage Warriors, Combate. Like that's a higher level of the regional scene. We talked about this. He's got 6 losses on already. 5 have come to UFC veterans. Now, not the highest UFC veteran. Someone was like Sean Soriano, Steve Garcia. So I mean, it is what it is. But what I see from him, he can fight out of both stances, pressure fighter. Pretty much, he's pretty wild. Like, he's a wild man. He wants to brawl it out. I like that he appears to have fun while he's fighting. I was watching this one fight. I mentioned this last time. He was doing like misdirections, doing that like raise my hand high up here and then punch with the other hand, which I love. He does some spinning attacks. He really leaps into his punches, which can be a good thing because it gives a lot of power, but also leaves you to be open to get cracked yourself. But he throws a lot of whipping, hard shots. He also mixes kicks and punches together, combination, lots of hard kicks, chopping leg kicks. He can get in the clinch. He can dirty box. He also has a judo background, so look for some good clinch battles in there. He'll shoot for some takedowns, but more of like an upper body clinch kind of guy. We show some pretty cool throws against Trevor Peck. Mean ground and pound on top. Wild scrambles. Like he's not the most controlling guy, probably because of that judo background. He'll lose position to go for subs, but he'll roll underneath for subs, which I don't think is the best advice at this level, but it is fun if he catches something. He's got 3 subs on his record. I like both guys. If Mariscal can turn this strictly into a wrestling match, I actually do think he has a little bit of an advantage in the wrestling. But the way you did the intro, I'm assuming you're taking Jenkins. I'm taking Jenkins too. I really like this guy striking, especially his kicks. I think we're gonna have a little bit of war. Like, I think Mariscal might be a little underrated, but give me Jenkins my win. I think Jenkins wins unanimous decision.
Yeah. I should have qualified my statement a little more because I'm excited about Jenkins, but it is by the eyeball test and by his results in like Eternal MMA and Hex Fight Series, even before getting to and on the Contender Series, before even getting to the UFC, that it's really based on. I'm excited about him, but I still see him as a potential that hasn't really entirely put together a complete performance in the UFC. I mean, he's 2-0 in the UFC, but he has a pretty one-sided win over Don Shainis, and it is still just a heartbreaking moment to me when you can hear at the end of that fight, before the decision is even announced, you can hear Shainis clearly over the mics go, "I don't belong here." And he was just so dejected. And he was right. He doesn't belong. And that's not tragic in itself. A circle of life. There's thousands of MMA fighters and only about 60 of them are UFC featherweights. But that was my takeaway from that fight as much as anything else as well. And then the Emmers fight, he won a split decision, but it was one of the worst decisions at least at the UFC level this year. I gave all 3 rounds of that fight to Emmers, and everybody else that I've talked to and everyone that I see on MMA decisions gave at least 2 rounds to Emmers. It was just a mystifyingly bad decision because as good as Jenkins looks as a striker, he just got outstruck. Emmers was taller, longer, faster, responding to single strikes by tagging Jenkins 2 or 3 times. I still think Jenkins looks like a quality UFC level featherweight, and who knows, maybe a future fringe contender. But I'm still waiting for him to put it all together and show it in the octagon in one outing. This would be an opportune time to do so. I would assume that if any rounds against Mariscal are in doubt, being the Australian in the Australian arena can only help him. But even if I think Jenkins has higher ultimate upside than Mariscal, I think Mariscal seems like more of a complete product right now. I thought he looked better against Trevor Peek than Jenkins really has in either of his UFC performances. So give me Mariscal to pull this one out. I have the feeling he's going to draw a fun fight out of Jenkins. He's going to march him down. And if Jenkins fights like he did against Emmers, we might see some punch stats that show Mariscal like outlanding him 2-1. There's every chance that Jenkins is landing the more significant of the significant strikes. But I think Mariscal is going to make this uncomfortable for Jenkins. and we'll get to see how he responds to that. Give me Mariscal by decision here in what I guess is a pretty substantial upset. So, yeah, I believe in Jack Jenkins, just not on Saturday.
You gave me the old misdirection. You did the hey, look at Jenkins.
Hey, look at Jenkins.
Yeah, look at Jenkins and punch me in the face the other hand. That was a nice job. Let me give you. I'll give you a little story time with Keith for the because we haven't done one in a while. How I'm a terrible human being. Like we might lose some listeners over this, especially the animal lovers. I was cutting the grass. This was probably about a month ago, and I'm about to cut the grass. And right to my right, like you're making the lines and everything, and I just noticed something on the ground to my right. I look, and it's just like I don't know what the alien looking thing. It's like this. It's like I don't know. Hold on, how do I do this? Why can't I do this? It's like this big.
Okay.
And I'm like, what the hell? And it's like hairless animal looking. What the hell is that on the ground? I didn't know what it was. And then I look over, there was a second one, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I thought it was like, I found ET. Like, it was the grossest thing. Anyways, Google baby squirrels. They were squirrels.
Okay.
Yeah, they were just disgusting looking. Anyways, I tell my oldest kid, the one that you talk about softball, she comes out and she sees it, and she's like, oh, we got to take care of it. And she, like, gets a glove on and picks it up. And I'm like, they were still alive. It was moving around. But it was like, it was under, a tree. It probably fell out of the tree or something. I don't know. I don't know. Do they have nests? I have no idea. Where's a squirrel? I don't know. Someone. I'm showing so much of an idiot I am. So I did the whole circle of life thing, and we have like hawks in the air, and we have like sometimes I see an eagle. Like we just came back from Arcadia National Park where we had 2 bald eagles like right above, like right next to us. It was incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right on the mountains. It was incredible. It was like a god moment. Anyway, so I said, you like seeing eagles? You like seeing the hawks? Like, what the hell do you think they're gonna eat? The hawk's gonna see that thing because they have eyes like a hawk, and it's gonna fly down and eat that thing. And she's like, no, and I'm like, yeah, but you like seeing hawks, don't you? She's like, yeah. I'm like, you can't see hawks; they don't eat those things. Like they eat moles. They eat. Like one time, she had a little baby turtle. We still don't know what happened to it. She was like, she had this little like sandbox and was letting it play. And it was too high for it because the hawk came down and ate it when you weren't looking. Like that's what I told her. So I'll show her. So I was gonna let it stay there, just get eaten by the hawks or whatever. But long story short, my daughter wanted. I let her take it in and put it in a box, and then brought it to an animal sanctuary to let them live. But
where they fed it to the hawks.
They fed they fed it to the snake.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they feed those like pythons and stuff, just literal white lab mice. Like,
yeah, that's like, hey, we changed the diet today. Here's a squirrel. Here's a baby squirrel.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Yeah. But yeah, nice job. Take a look at what a baby squirrel looks like.
I Googled disgusting. And I'm like,
I saw 2 of them right next to my foot. What the fuck?
Ew.
I was waiting for like a scene in like one of those like Jurassic Parks or something. You see like the little baby, you're like looking down, like,
and then something just comes from the side, like rips your head out.
And you're looking like this, like, oh, where's the mama? And you just hear a sound, you turn, and it's like a freaking raptor about to attack me. Yeah.
Next up, we have another men's featherweight matchup as Shane Jung looks to keep his job probably against Gabriel Miranda. Jung, the 30-year-old New Zealander and City Kickboxing product, is 13-7 overall. He is 2-4 in the UFC, and he is on a 3-fight losing streak. Fought most recently back in February at UFC 284, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Blake Bilder. He will look to get back on track here. Again, even today, 4 losses in a row tend to mean a pink slip unless you're already a made man or woman.
Is he related to Sam Alvey? Do we know?
He's not related to Sam Alvey, but he is a City Kickboxing guy.
Okay, yeah, that works.
Well, he is now. I mean, his first fight in the UFC was against Alex Volkanovski. And but actually, you know what? I think that's before Volkanovski came to City Kickboxing.
Yeah,
that's what it is. So I'm sure Shane Jung like a couple months after like losing to Volkanovski, sees Volkanovski walk in the door at City Kickboxing and goes, "Oh shit, come on."
I wonder if he's like like Volkanovski walks in and he like says like, "Yo, fuck that guy. Like we're not gonna be friends with him." And they're like, "No, he's like the best guy in the world. Yeah, we're happy he joined the team." Like, no, he's welcome. Like, what do you mean, guys? He's not welcome. It's like, no. You might not be welcome, dude.
The little John Jones, Rashad Evans moment of City Kickboxing.
Yeah, like you're ready to be his sparring partner because you're not the guy anymore.
Man, how must it be for Kevin Jousset when the people they have in his general weight range are like Blood Diamond, Israel Adesanya, like, oh, I'm sure Volkanovski could light him up.
Be fun. Yeah,
must be a blast. Anyway, Miranda, 33-year-old Brazilian, is 16-6 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC, but his debut took place last September at the second UFC Paris card of 2022, where he stepped up on short notice, up a weight class, and had to run into the buzzsaw that is Benoit Saint-Denis, kind of like Saint-Denis himself in his UFC debut a year or two before that. He got knocked out early in the second round, and the first round was ugly too. So he gets a bit of a mulligan on that, but definitely would like to get into the win column against Jung here. Keith, who's the favorite? The favorite is -160. The underdog is +130.
Miranda's the favorite.
Shane Jung is your favorite, -160. Gabriel Miranda +130. And I'm not going to lie, I don't get it.
Have you seen Miranda fight? Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Miranda, he's limited. He's almost a throwback Brazilian fighter because he is a very creative, very technically sound, very opportunistic grappler who sometimes struggles to get the fight to the ground on his terms. He's just a 2003 Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter in the UFC, blipped forward 20 years. But I'm thinking that's enough to get past Shane Jung. Shane Jung looks the part of a UFC featherweight. Like, he's got the size. He projects as reasonably athletic. He wants to strike, but is comfortable on the ground, but just none of it works. In his 3 losses, and in fairness to him, Ludovic Klein, Omar Morales, and Blake Builder in a row are 3 powerfully built featherweights who are all at least decent athletes. And in the case of Klein, a standout athlete. And he's been kind of overwhelmed. Klein posterized him, but Morales and Builder were both just too much for him physically. And I'm not sure what the answer is. But at this point, his only wins in the UFC are over Austen Arnett, who's kind of a borderline guy, and Rolando D, who's one of the lower level fighters the UFC has had in that weight range in the last 5 or 6 years. I expect that Miranda's going to be able to get this fight to the ground sooner or later. And when he does, I think he's going to be at least able to keep Jung down and keep him in peril. If he has to run through some fire on his way to get there, I think he'll be okay. Jung throws in combination, yes, but like, he just doesn't have much pop. Yeah, I mean, give me Gabriel Miranda. I'm not going to pick something I've never seen before, so I'm not going to say he gets the sub on Jung, even though Miranda has, I think, like a 90% submission rate in his wins. But give me Miranda to get a pretty dominant decision here. I don't really get this line, and maybe I'll just have to be shown the light when these two guys go into the cage in Sydney. But I got Miranda all day in this one.
Man, no love for Shane Jung. Huh? Who would be a better fighter, Shane Jung or Burt Jung? He spent a lot of time with Rocky.
That's true.
You know? I remember that scene. Hey, I remember that scene where he got mad at Rocky when he started hitting him and saying, "I'm not a bum. I don't want to do a job for you." And
I think
Rocky,
he was drunk. I think he was drunk at the time too.
And Rocky didn't want the smoke. He didn't throw back. Nope. He didn't want that smoke. He was.
He knew who the real,
Tommy Gunn punched him in the face and he took it clean. Didn't even get knocked out.
But Burt Jung, it's why he got them that giant talking robot for like his birthday because he was trying to appease the real alpha in their extended family.
That's right.
Dude, Paulie is the version of just that MMA fan mook who thinks he could win in a fight even though he's completely untrained. He's just like, I would just snap, man. My muscle memory would just take over.
Yeah. I'll break when he's like, I'll break your teeth. They say it to like the world champion. Yeah. Yeah, I got a lot. I still be so this guy. I'm not friends with the guy. He's in like I'm in a couple of fantasy football leagues, and my friend Jay. We're not enemies, but we're not friends. See, we have a very close mutual friend, and we were watching fights one. And I remember Mark Hunt was fighting, and the guy was there. He was drunk, and he was like, "Oh my god, if you gave me 6 months, I would crush that guy." And I'm like, it's just like Mark Hunt would hit you and like knock your head into like the stands.
Dude, but you could take all the free shots you wanted on Mark Hunt for a full 2 minutes.
Yeah.
He could give you a 2-minute head start and still kill you.
Yeah, the purist in me, like when he said that was probably about 7 years ago, and I've never forgiven the guy. So Shane Young, he's fun. I'll say it. He's a fun fighter. Like he's a high output fighter, fights with very controlled pressure. The issue is he struggles to cut off the cage, so he's kind of chasing. He does work behind a jab. It kind of just touches, but when there's an opportunity, he unloads. Problem is he lacks punching power. He's not a big puncher. He can battle the pocket. He throws a lot of combination. I like his combinations that he mixes head and body shots, like he didn't just head hunt. Pretty strong head movement, but he gets hit a lot because he's constantly moving forward. So even though he's bobbing and weaving and slipping, and he still gets caught. He's an okay offensive wrestler. Like he'll look for some takedowns, but he's a weak defensive wrestler and he struggles to get back up. Now, Gabriel Miranda, he's aggressive on the feet for a guy who like wants to get the fight on the ground. Like he'll slug it out a little bit on the feet. I say he's a serviceable striker. Like he's not great, but he's not terrible. Like I think I like his striking a little bit more than you do. He throws combinations. He's got some decent pop. I think his striking lands because of the threat of the takedowns. Like what always helps us the grapple a little bit. He does keep his chin a little high in the air. Good wrestler. Definitely like a grappler style to him where he'll kind of just dive in at things. He needs to improve his top control, but you mentioned he's a BJJ black belt. He's a serious threat. He's got 15 subs on his record. He chained submissions together super well. Like you said, he's an old school. One of these guys is probably better on his back than he is on top. He's got a great guillotine if he gets the opportunity. He has gassed out in the past, and I'm really worried about the damage he took against Benos and Denis, because Denis beat the brakes off of him, almost knocked him out at the very end of the first round.
Again, just a weird throwback to what happened to Saint Denis against Eliseo dos Santos, and it's almost like the tape in the ring, like the just short notice ass kicking. Just have to pass it on to the next guy. And they'll die in 6 days. Yeah.
It's like the initiation to the gang, like when all the gang members
they get jumped in.
Yeah, like all the gang members jumped in. Like he probably felt like he was fighting like 6 people at once.
Probably.
So I'm not very high on either fighter, but I'm gonna go with you. Like hopefully we can get this the consensus upset thing going. I'm gonna go with Miranda. Young should have the cardio advantage and probably the output advantage. But Miranda should have such a big gap in the grappling. Like I know that he's good at that. So I think eventually he'll find a way to get the fight to the ground. And you wouldn't pick submission, but I'm going to. I think he locks up a sub. I say he does in the very first round. Give me Miranda by first round submission.
Welterweights are up next as Mike Blood Diamond Mathetha looks for his first UFC win against the debuting Charlie Radtke. Blood Diamond, 35-year-old Zimbabwean by way of New Zealand, is 3-2 as a professional mixed martial artist. He's 0-2 since joining the UFC about a year and a half ago. He fought most recently last July at UFC 277, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Orion Kosi. He is still looking for his first UFC win. He hopes to get it at the expense of Radtke. 33-year-old Illinois native is 7-3 overall. He comes into this fight on a 4-fight win streak in CFFC, which has brought him all the way to the welterweight title there. He is the reigning CFFC welterweight champ. I already alluded to this off the top, so nothing to make Keith guess. Radtke is minus 240. Mathetha plus 200. I get why. If you look at Blood Diamond, a highlight reel from his kickboxing career, you understand why Israel Adesanya was all just wait till you see this guy about him. But I already said that Gabriel Miranda feels like a 2003 jiu-jitsu artist in MMA, even though he's actually a pretty good fighter. Mathetha feels like a 1994 kickboxer in no holds barred.
Yeah.
He has all the strikes. He throws in combination. He's blindingly fast. He has good power, not Alex Pereira power, but good power. But he is unable to manage distance against MMA fighters. He's been physically just bullied and overwhelmed by both the guys he's fought. He got out cardioed by a Kosi brother. He hasn't shown anything. It's almost surprising to me that this guy has come out of one of the 5 best camps on the planet over the last 5 years, this unprepared to compete in MMA. Jeremiah Wells is a very good fighter. No real shame in losing that fight how he did. Jeremiah Wells is going to finish a lot of people in the first round before it's all said and done. But Orion Kosi is a borderline UFC talent, and Mathetha just didn't have much for him. Here against Radtke, this is a terrible style matchup. Charlie Radtke is a big, strong dude who is a active, competitive grappler. You know, you go search for film on him, you find more grappling competitions than MMA fights. And he's a decent wrestler. His entries don't look fast or technical, but he usually finishes the takedown. And part of that might be just him having some physical diesel to him and fighting overmatched guys in CFFC and in Triton, but they weren't any more overmatched than Blood Diamond is going to be. I feel like this is a pretty obvious one. Unless Blood Diamond catches him with the best fight of his brief MMA career, unless Blood Diamond catches him with the best single knee or uppercut or head kick of his brief MMA career, Radtke's going to take him down and maul him. The other possibility is that Blood Diamond has actually made significant strides to round out his skill set in the 13 or 14 months he's been gone. That's possible, but at age 35, I don't think it's the likeliest outcome. I think Blood Diamond shows up and he is what he has been, and Charlie Radtke runs him over on the ground. Give me Radtke by, I'll say first round TKO, ground and pound, but first round submission would not be out of the realm of possibility either.
All right, so who's a better wrestler, Blood Diamond or Burt Young? Burt Young was in that movie Win-Win, which is about wrestling.
Ooh, I haven't seen that one, so I feel I'm coming unprepared. You don't like to make calls without the tape study. So I'm usually the guy that's willing to make the off-the-cuff call.
Yeah. What if he's like in The Sopranos where he can't breathe and he's coughing and stuff? That might equal it out a little bit.
I don't think that was acting.
Yeah, it might not be. That's true. Oh God, Blood Diamond. So as you mentioned, he's a very good kickboxer, technically sound. He parries punches, which I really like. Great kicking game, hard kicks everywhere. He throws kicks from like weird angles, like he'll love a question mark kick and stuff like that. Good clinch striking, nice knees inside the clinch. But his grappling is terrible. Like you mentioned, he was quickly taken down by Jeremiah Wells. Jeremiah Wells is a really good fighter, but he was, submitted. He did show some small improvements on the ground against Kosi, but that's not saying much for his grappling. He's still not close to UFC level. Now, Radtke is not a guy that, like, I know you said he's going to maul him and everything, but he's not a guy that we're excited joining the UFC. Like, he's a big dude. I'll give him that. He's a big welterweight. His boxing is pretty serviceable. But he throws a lot of single strikes, which I don't like. But he's got a nice, powerful left hook. I'd say he's got some plus power. He uses a lot of head movement, which is good, some hard kicks. But he's been rocked in past fights. I haven't seen so much of his grappling. I haven't seen like really good wrestling on him. And he's a weak defensive wrestler, but he is a submission threat. As you mentioned, like he's got good control on the ground, some good back takes. I want to take Blood Diamond. Like, it's in Australia and, big moment. The whole team's there. But until I see some improvements on the ground, I can't pick him either. I think Radtke finds a way to get the fight to the ground. I think he eventually locks the submission. I'll say that Blood Diamond makes it to the second because, he gets a little, like, he turtles up, he gets very defensive, and that helps you last if you instead of trying to scramble and get up. But I think Radtke eventually locks into submission. Give me Radtke by second round submission.
We have a lightweight matchup between Nasrat Haqparast and Landon Quinones. Haqparast, the 28-year-old German of Afghanistani descent, is 14-5 overall. He is 6-4 in the UFC. He last fought almost exactly a year ago, taking a unanimous decision over John Makdessi at the second UFC Paris card of last year. Prior to that, he had been on a 2-fight losing streak against Dan Hooker and Bobby Green. He was scheduled to appear in Paris this past weekend against Sean Patterson, but Patterson fell out. They brought in Quinones, but that fight had to be bumped to this week in Australia. So we get it on this card. It will be the debut for Quinones, the 26-year-old Floridian, who is 7-1-1 overall. He is a veteran of the 31st season of The Ultimate Fighter. He is also the outgoing Titan FC lightweight champ. Those are good things. The bad thing is he is one of the biggest underdogs on the card. Haqparast is -400. Quinones +300. Keith, win or lose against Haqparast, let me know how you feel about Quinones as a prospect, and then tell me how the fight goes.
Yeah, I think it's we're not a gambling show. I want to shout out to my boy Clint. I was a guest on his show, Die Hard MMA. That is a betting podcast. He's a good dude. I've been a guest a couple times. I know he's gonna reach out to you and get you on the show one day. He's a good dude. I just want to make a shout out before I forget. So this is not a gambling show, but that line's nuts. That line to me is looking at one fight on the Ultimate Fighter show. We had a terrible. He fell right into a triangle. I've watched Quinones. I'm sorry, I know I'm saying it wrong. Quinones. He's not a bad fighter. Like if this was a betting show, I'd say dog a pass. Like I like the betting odds on Quinones if you like to make a bet. Now, yeah, he's got a tough match. A UFC debut on short notice against a guy like Nasrat Haqparast. That's quite a feat. I mean, Haqparast southpaw. It's funny because he looks like Kelvin Gastelum, but what people don't talk about enough, he also fights like him. He's a counter striker who feints out well. Draws out the attack so he can land his own opens. He's explosive. He's got some pretty quick hands. He wings his punches, wings his power punches, really whips him at his opponent. This kind of makes him wild, makes a little bit of a brawler, but he's got serious power. I mean, he loves to close the distance, get inside, throw like hard uppercuts, similar to like what like Junior Dos Santos used to do. But with his power comes some risks. We've seen him get struck and hurt. He's got good takedown defense, but it isn't perfect. Like I go back to like the Marcin fight. Marcin Hell took him down like 3 times in that fight. Alex Munoz, who's a good wrestling background, has taken him down. But he's hard to hold. He's got a good get up game. Not much of an offensive wrestler. He won't wrestle too much. Big concern is his fight against Bobby Green. Like I question his fight IQ. Because he was getting dominated by Green, and he never really changed up his game plan. He just kept winging the same overhand strikes, which weren't working. He needed to tighten everything and get inside, and he really didn't. Quinones, southpaw, good volume on his feet. He's kind of like a mid-range striker, works in there behind a jab. I love that he goes to the body, throws a lot of combinations. He wings his overhand left, like he'll throw a combination and kind of wing with it overhand left. Almost leaps at his opponent with his power shots. Good calf kick, but he does throw a lot of naked leg kicks. He's going to get counted at a higher level. He has those John Jones oblique kicks. I like his step and knees. He will, he kept talking on the Ultimate Fighter show that he's a striker, but and is obviously is showing against Jason Knight where he was submitted quickly doesn't bode well for his grappling. But I don't think his grappling is too bad. Like he will shoot for takedowns. Now he will often shoot a little too far away. So he needs to improve that, kind of set up his takedowns. He also needs to improve his own takedown defense. More concerned is he's been rocked on the regional scene, but I think he's felt, for regional scene, not too bad. But his biggest strength, I like that he's a builder. He's a guy, he gets stronger as the fight goes on, the way he fights. A lot of times he just like touching, just kind of scoring points, not wasting too much energy. Like I said, Quinones didn't have the best showing on Tough, but I think he's a quality fighter. I think he's a good addition to the UFC. I think he's better than what he showed. That said, I'm still going with the favorite. I don't think he should be a heavy favorite. I think he, make negative 170, 160 would makes more sense to me, not negative 400. I do think he's a little faster. I think he hits harder. I like that he's had, a full camp instead of Quinones. I also think he can, he's got pretty good takedowns, so I think he'll be able to stop some takedowns for Quinones, though I do expect Quinones to shoot for them. But I'll take Haqparast. I'll see what's my decision.
Yeah, I like the whole breakdown there. I think Quinones is better than he's better than the line indicates, and he's better than the showing on the Ultimate Fighter. Like Jason Knight is just a guy. Well, there was a time when that was his calling card.
Yeah, he was a dog back in the day.
And for a guy who went off and did a bunch of bare knuckle boxing, his real best quality in his MMA run up to that point was that he was a really good opportunistic submission artist. It's he's
a bit of like Bryce Mitchell, even with a similar personality.
Yeah, just kind of a surprisingly sophisticated ground fighter for a total hit. Yeah. You threw out what I think is going to be the real difference maker, and it's Haqparast power. And on the one hand, you can say, well, what power? Haqparast hasn't knocked anybody out in like 5 or 6 years. He's become a decision machine. But that's what somebody would say who's just going off the stats, going off the fight finder, going off numbers, and not actually watching the fights. Somebody say that, like who had, a bad betting advice column or a bad betting show. If you watch Haqparast fights, he still has good power. He kind of like, I think it was, I can't remember who it was on this card that I said the same thing. He doesn't always get the knockout, but you can tell there's a power differential that when he lands cleanly, it's the other guy feels it and it's changing their game plan. I still feel that way about Haqparast. It'll be interesting if Quinones decides to try and wrestle Haqparast and take him down, because his defensive wrestling is sometimes kind of porous. But I'm thinking we get a pretty exciting fight on the feet here, where Haqparast wins rounds just by virtue of doing more visible damage. Or regardless of what the punch stats say, there's no question who had the other fighter in trouble or who did more damage. Nonetheless, I do think Landon Quinones is a good addition to the UFC. Just this will not be his night in Sydney on Saturday. Give me Haqparast by decision. Next up, and at least as the card is constituted as of 10 days out, the top prelim at UFC 293 is a light heavyweight matchup between Carlos Ulberg and Dawoon Jung. Ulberg, the 32-year-old New Zealander, is 8-1 overall. He is 4-1 in the UFC since joining out of the 4th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He dropped his debut via knockout to Kennedy Zechikwu. That was back in March of 2021 in a fight where he'd been doing well until he wasn't. Since then, he's been perfect against Fabio Charant, Tafan Chukwi, Nikolai Negamarianu, and Ihor Potieria. The most recent of those, the Potieria fight, was a first-round knockout at UFC on ABC, Rosenstrike versus Almeida back in May. He will look to make it 5 in a row against, if we're being honest, his first really legitimate opponents, and maybe certify himself a person of interest in the rankings. And he's meeting Jung on a bit of a slide. 29-year-old Korean is 15-4-1 overall. He's 4-2-1 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that the 2 losses are in his last 2 fights. He opened up his UFC run with 5-fight unbeaten streak. Since then, he has run into Dustin Jacoby last summer, getting knocked out in the first round, and Devin Clark, who beat him via unanimous decision at the Lewis versus Spivak card in February. So Jung, that job might not be on the line, but definitely looking to recover some kind of momentum here where Ulberg has a ton of it. He is also the strong favorite. Ulberg is out there around minus 280, Jung plus 230 on the comeback. Keith, I'm going to flip this to you. All I'm going to throw out at first is Ulberg has looked a lot better than I expected him to after he got his head knocked off in momentary lapse against Kennedy Zechikwu. But his 4-fight win streak since then is about as soft as they come, even in one of the UFC's more depleted divisions. Dawoon Jung is the first real dude that Carlos Ulberg brought. So maybe he beats him, maybe he doesn't. But I mean, this is going to be a test. Tell me how you see this one going.
Which is why I'm surprised the line isn't closer. I mean, Dong Jude, regardless, I mean, I understand he's on a little bit of a skid, so that always skews it a little bit. And obviously, I know the bettors are trying to get money to come in. So we talked off the air briefly before this, and I said that this fight should be on the main card. I'm assuming you agree with me, right?
Oh, absolutely. And not just on the competitive merit, but Carlos Ulberg has the most star upside of anybody outside of the top fight, and maybe Manel Kape. But I would say Ulberg has more.
Yeah, I agree.
I go on this rant every time. So I'll just say, bad guy from a 90s kickboxing movie. Like, he's this huge, super good looking, jacked guy who has that kind of Rock, Dwayne Johnson in wrestling arrogance and knocks people the hell out. Like, why is this dude not on the main card?
Yeah, anyway. He looks like he could be in like Cobra Kai. Like they bring him in, like, they bring this guy in to, he owns this other gym and he does this deadly technique. It's the one that makes Cobra Kai look tame. And then Jung's good. So I mean, this is a big step up in competition for him. You said that he's kind of had some softballs tossed to him, which is true. But you know what he's doing? He's knocking them out of the park. Like he's not hitting singles.
Well, in his last 4 fights, Ulberg has 3 first-round knockouts and 1 heartfelt apology from his opponent's coach.
Yeah. I remember I used to play like a men's slow pitch soft, like whatever. And I remember when I was like in my 20s, I was like competitive. Like I take a walk, like I was just trying to get us to win. And then like when I was in like my 30s, I was just like, they'd be like, 3-0 count, like take a pitch, and I'm like, no, it's 3-0 count because I didn't like those pitches. I'm swinging, like I'm swinging for the fences. Like I don't give them up the team anymore. I'm just trying to hit dingers. So I'd come back to softball. Carlos Ulberg was on the team. He seems like a fun guy. If me and my wife ever get divorced, I'm gonna fly out to Australia and just hang out with Carlos Ulberg and just.
So is she?
Yeah. Oh, fuck you. Oh, you got me on that one. That was a good one, dude. Nice job. Nice job. All right. When you get knocked out, you get knocked out. Hey, you know what? We might both be happy because I get the scraps. I don't know. Ulberg, I mean, he's a fantastic athlete. He's tremendous footwork to avoid shots. He's a kickboxer, very poised on the feet, especially from the distance. He's technical. He's a good outfighter. He sets up his shots so well with feints, both his hands and his feet. Explosive, quick hands, accurate. I mean, the dude's a sniper. Cuts angles, lands well from different angles. Fabio Charette, like you talk about his coach saying he quit. He quit because he couldn't get past the check left hook. Pedro, how do you say his name? The last guy he fought was getting blasted by the same left hook too. He uses footwork so well to pull his opponents into his power shots, and he's got serious power. I mean, he's touched three opponents, I think three in a row. Mm-hmm. He's hard to hit because of his footwork and his high guard defense. Very complete kicking game. He loves the oblique shots, the calf kicks. He's not much of an offensive wrestler. His defensive wrestling has been pretty good. It better be more if he steals my wife, because that's all I can do now is wrestle. And even then, I don't know if I can steal that and do that anymore. Jung's a massive guy for the weight class. Like he looks like a heavyweight. He's huge and thick. On the feet, he's a boxer. Pretty quick hands. Throws down on the pipe. I say underrated power. I mean, he knocked out Mike Rodriguez. He brutalized Kennedy and Chukwu with elbows inside. Super good. Super good wrestler. Like super underrated. Go back to like the William Knight fight. He took down William Knight like, I don't know, like 15 times or something like that. And like I know he had. Yeah. I mean, that fight hasn't aged well. On the flip side, he was taken down by Devin Clark 3 times, but Devin Clark's a highly decorated. I shouldn't want to say highly decorated, but pretty decorated wrestler. He's got strong cardio, especially considering he wrestles for 15 minutes. I am worried about his chin though. Like he was recently knocked out by Dustin Jacoby. So this is mostly a striker versus grappler. I think the lines are a little off, but I'm leaning with the favorite. I'm going with the striker. I say that Ulberg uses his footwork, keeps his distance, and he just catches Jung coming in. I think he knocks him out again, like gets his 4th knockout, keeps his train rolling. I think he's fighting like a highly ranked opponent next. Give me Ulberg by 1st round knockout.
Yeah, I like the breakdown there, and I like your assessment of both fighters. Jung is huge, and he's a guy whose hugeness is not properly expressed in the tail of the tape. You're like, 6'3", 205. All the light heavyweights are 6'3" and 205, except for William Knight. But then you look at him and it's like, oh no, dude, you're a big dude. Because he doesn't even have that stereotypical Korean thing where his shoulders look broad and he looks giant, and then he turns to the side and he's like a playing card. Like there's just no depth from front to back. He doesn't have that thing going on. He is a big dude. And well-rounded fighter, well-conditioned fighter, all the things you said. And when he's at his best and he wrestles the strikers and strikes with the wrestlers, he's pretty successful. He's had a bad run here, but Jacoby just blew him away before he could really get his game untracked. And then Clark is just a kind of sticky, tricky. Even though Clark has hit his ceiling, I feel as though Clark still trips up a lot of more skilled, more athletically talented fighters, like the way he did Alonzo Menefield, the way he did Da Woon Jung. The thing is, I'm worried about Jung, even if he understands, okay, I don't want to try to strike with this dude. I need to get this fight to the ground. Ulberg's footwork and speed are really good. I don't think it's going to be easy for Jung even to get into the range where he can set up the kind of takedowns he likes. Just getting his hands on Ulberg and forcing a clinch, I think, is going to be tougher than he expects. And he's going to be going against a guy that punches pretty damn hard while he's on the back foot or sliding out laterally. Yeah, I still think Jung is good. I still think he's better than the 3-fight losing streak I'm about to predict him to be on. But I think this is just a bad matchup, the wrong guy at the wrong time. I think you said Ulberg by 1st round knockout. I'm with you. I think it'll look a little like the Jacoby fight. Jung just won't really be able to get going at all before he's eating nasty sniper-like shots from unexpected angles, goes down in a hail of leather, and this thing's over. And that'll be 4 first-round knockouts in a row for Carlos Ulberg. And sitting at home in Rentham, Massachusetts, Fabio Serrato will be like, see, that's why I didn't enter. I told you guys. Next up on the UFC 293 main card is a light heavyweight matchup between Tyson Pedro and Anton Turkalj. Pedro, the 31-year-old Australian, is 9-4 overall. He's 5-4 in the UFC. He's coming into this fight off of a loss. He fought most recently at UFC 284 back in February, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Modestas Bukauskas. Prior to that, he had back-to-back first-round knockouts of Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. Pause intentional. He'll look to get back to his winning ways against Turkalj. The 27-year-old Swede is 8-2 overall. He is 0-2 since joining the UFC out of the 6th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted against Jailton Almeida, got tapped out in the first round, came back this March at UFC Fight Night, Jan versus Dvalishvili, where he came up short in a unanimous decision against Vitor Petrino. The favorite in this fight is -150. The underdog is +120. Who are they?
I'm going to say Pedro. Pedro's a favorite.
You are correct, sir. Pedro is -150. Turkalj +120. And part of me wants to say, man, Pedro should be a way bigger favorite than that. Turkalj has shown next to nothing. And then I think, okay, wait a sec. Pedro is 6.5 years removed from any decent wins. He debuted in the UFC with back-to-back wins over Khalil Roundtree and Paul Craig, both of which have aged pretty well. The rest of it's been a mess. He was gone for like 4 years, but even on his way out, he got finished in back-to-back fights by Ovince St. Preux and Shogun. I think we both said this when he came back last spring. I kind of assumed he was gone for good. I hadn't forgotten about him. I just figured he'd decided this wasn't for him. Then he came back, got back-to-back wins in the space of a couple months over, I hate to say it, but 2 of the lower level light heavyweights in the UFC, maybe 2 of the lower level light heavyweights of the modern era in the UFC. Like, I love Ike Villanueva, but he was never that great, and he was pretty shot by the time he got to the UFC. And Harry Hunsucker, a very funny guy, once said that he had made the career decision to go from being the worst heavyweight in the UFC to being the worst light heavyweight in the UFC. Whoever said that should get a raise. But he beat him, and he gets a fight against Bukauskas, a guy who's a decent fighter, but nowhere near ranked, and he didn't have anything for him. At this point, all Pedro seems to really have going for him is aggression and hoping his opponent is terrible. I like, seriously, like he hacked up Ike Villanueva with leg kicks. That was a known path to victory against Ike Villanueva. And he overwhelmed Harry Hunsucker just because Hunsucker isn't good. I don't know what else to say. Like, at his best, he had a reckless striking game that left him wide open to counters. But when he connected with good power. He's a big athletic dude who swung everything really hard, and he had a surprisingly effective ground game, even if it was just wild scrambles. And even then, much like his striking, he was vulnerable to his opponents. Like, he lost to Ovince St. Preux in a really, really fun 3-minute fight because rolling around on the ground with Ovince St. Preux without a plan is a really, really bad idea.
Yeah.
That's, I say all of that, and then I'm like, yeah, but he's going to beat Turkalj.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. He's not good.
No, but Turkalj, when you look at Turkalj, you're like, is this guy the second coming of Alexander Gustafsson? He's like this super tall Swedish guy. He's built like a good light heavyweight. He's only 27 years old. You'd think he'd have all the upside in the world, but in reality, he's not very athletic, actually. He looks like he should be a very good athlete. He isn't. Despite being huge, he's not very physically strong. Jailton Almeida made origami out of him. There's not too much shame there, but he wasn't able to get his game on track against Vitor Petrino either. His striking is like when John Jones first got into the UFC, he was incredibly dangerous, but it's like his striking had no game plan. He just would come out, throw an oblique kick, a spinning back fist. He just had little pieces of techniques he'd throw together and just didn't have anything resembling a conventional kickboxing game. That obviously has changed, but that's kind of like Turkalj, only Turkalj isn't John Jones. He doesn't have any of the other tools that Jones has. He's not the athlete he is. He's not as strong as he is. He's not as fast. Turkalj comes out and throws wild stuff. He's not good at keeping shorter opponents off him. He can't manage distance. He's really defensively porous. He's a good grappler. Like you can tell by looking at his old tape on regional shows in Europe, he's a good grappler, but he doesn't seem to have the physical tools to make that stuff go against UFC level light heavyweights. So I'm really down on both these people, but yeah, I'm going with Pedro, the favorite here. I just think if it stays on the feet, Pedro will probably knock him out. If it goes to the ground, it's more of a coin flip, but just in the face of all those unknowns, I see Pedro as the guy more likely to get his hand raised. Whatever happens, we probably don't get a war of attrition. It happens within the first 7 minutes of the fight. Give me Tyson Pedro. I'm going to say he gets a first round TKO. Probably just catches some transition on the ground where it's easier to just start punching Turkalj in the head than try to take the back or work for a guillotine or something. And Turkalj just gets pounded out like at the base of the cage or something.
Oh God, this fight.
That is the worst analysis I've ever given, and yet that's exactly what the fight's going to look like.
I mean, why is this fight on the main card is the most mind-boggling thing. Yeah, I mean, is this the worst fight in the history of the main cards of a pay-per-view since CM Punk fought? I'm being serious. Like, what's worse than this? I'm sure there's something out there.
I'm sure there's something that I'm not thinking of right now. I remember thinking, I remember there was a main event within the last year or two, or sorry, a co-main event within the last year or two, where like both guys were under 500 in the UFC and had never been ranked, but I can't remember what it was. This is as bad as it gets. And it's probably on the main card just because he and Tuivasa are big buddies and they'll do shoeies together if they both win.
Oh, yeah. Tyson Pedro, he's a big dude. He's definitely a plus athlete, moves pretty well, though he keeps his chin really high. He can back straight up on the center line. He does use feints to draw out attacks so he can counter, and he throws straight shots down the pipe, but he can be very gun shy at times, especially recently. He throws some deep kicks, and he's got some strong leg kicks, as you mentioned, in the Ike Villanueva fight. But, his durability is not there. His defense is not there. He will wrestle, but he's never been a great at it. Like, I always thought his wrestling was overrated. He's a weak defensive wrestler, as you mentioned. He was out wrestled by Shogun, and it wasn't a prime Mauricio Shogun.
No,
he struggles to get off the bottom. He is a submission threat. Yeah, he's got 5 subs on his record, but that was much earlier in his career against lower level guys. He, going back to that Shogun fight, he gassed out really bad. Bukaka's fight, he was gassed like 2 minutes into the fight. Turkalj, he's definitely a polar athlete. He likes to brawl. He wants to get in the pocket. He wants to brawl. He attacks with combos. He stands a little too tall for my liking. He has no power because he throws all arm punches. He does throw a lot of kicks, though they're often naked leg kicks, and he will attack some calf kicks. He closes distance and he body locks and he tries to wrestle, but he's not a good wrestler. His defensive wrestling is really bad. Definitely more of like a grappler. But he gassed out bad in his fight. So I'm going to give another betting advice. Take the under. I don't know what the under is, but I'm assuming something like 1.5 rounds, something. But you bet the under because both guys gassed out really bad. Like I can see someone just falling down and getting stopped. Both guys have durability issues. Both guys have gas tank issues. Man, I everything in me is say take Turkalj just because of his age. But I don't know. Like, it's in Australia. If it wasn't Australia, if it was just like a neutral site, I would take Turkalj. And I know that Australia hasn't been helping Pedro, but if Tyson Pedro can't beat Turkalj, like I'll put on that. This should be his retirement fight if he loses. Like, but that's definitely a shot there. Like, if he loses, he's done. I say he finds a way to win. I say somehow he ends up on top and he gets like a TKO late in the first round. But there's no confidence in that pick. Pedro, my first round TKO.
Next up on the UFC 293 main card is a heavyweight matchup between Justin Tafa and Austen Lane. This fight, of course, is not even a rematch, but a rebooking of their first fight, which ended in a no contest at the UFC on ABC Emmett versus Topuria card back in June. They weren't even able to get to work. Just 29 seconds in, Lane poked Tafa in the eye really badly. The fight was immediately waved off. It was a no contest, ruled accidental. They're meeting now about 2 months later. Keith, we previewed this fight for that card in the 8 or 9 weeks since then. Has anything happened to change your mind about it? Me either, but
I'll say this: lately, pretty good for those 30 seconds.
Yeah,
I'll still stick with my pick.
I mean, he landed the most significant strike of the fight. It was a fight ender. Apparently, somebody feels differently about it though, because the first time they met, Tafa was a minus 175 favorite. All you really saw was him get Lane finger up to the third knuckle in his eyeball, and Tafa's now a minus 240 favorite. He's now almost a 2.5 to 1 favorite. Lane a full 2 to 1 underdog.
Wow.
So
give me Lane. Yeah, I'll give you another betting advice. Give me Lane at those odds.
There you go.
That's not my pick. I'm just saying for those odds. Yeah.
I get it. It'll be interesting to see what happens to that line as we go along, but I'm just going to plug our initial analysis back in there. So sit back and enjoy this antique video. Next up at UFC on ABC 5, Keith, if you got your dream job and you were allowed to set the bout order of every UFC card, you weren't the matchmaker, you didn't get to book the matches, you just get to put them on the card. We have one unranked heavyweight slobber knocker on this card. It is Austen Lane versus Justin Tafa. Where would you put it on this card? And in the garbage is not allowed as an answer.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it. Yeah, like, mind you, you're asking me to do a 40-hour job in right on the spot. So that's going to be tough. So
and really, I mean, the entire 40 hours that week would be trying to figure out where to put Austen Lane versus Justin Tafa. Like all the rest of it kind of falls into place.
I probably would have it above the 2 replacements actually I would put it above the 3 replacements we just got this week. So those 3 would be below it. So Zumagor, Van, Peak, Mariscal, and Brundage, and Dumas. Like I Dumas. I would have those 3 definitely underneath it. But I'd probably have about fourth from the top.
Okay. At any rate, Lane, 35-year-old Floridian, is 12-3 overall. He will be making his UFC debut after his second appearance on Dana White's Contender Series. He was in the first episode of the second season where he got knocked out by Greg Hardy, part of Hardy's long and winding road to the UFC.
Who would have guessed at that moment that the guy in the UFC would be Austen Lane and the guy getting knocked out every single week would be Greg Hardy?
I wouldn't have dared to dream it. He got his second chance on the Contender Series last September against Richard Jacoby, knocked him out late in the first round. That was good enough to punch his ticket to the big octagon, where again he will make his debut this Saturday. Waiting for him will be Tafa. 29-year-old Australian is 6-3 overall. He's 3-3 in the UFC, and he is on a 2-fight win streak. Both of them sub 2-minute knockouts of Harry Hunsucker and Parker Porter. The most recent of those, the Porter fight, was at UFC 284 in February. So improbably, Justin Tafa looking to make it 3 in a row in the UFC, and he is a moderate favorite to get it done. He is minus 180, Lane around plus 150 as your underdog. Keith, I'm not sure whether Justin Tafa has gotten better or he's just sort of found his level and gotten down to, I mean, you can make the argument. Here's his UFC run. Yorgan De Castro, Juan Adams, Carlos Felipe, Jared Vandera, Harry Hunsucker, Parker Porter. If you throw Chase Sherman in there, he has the complete set of maybe the 7 worst heavyweights in the UFC.
Yeah. Let's talk about Jung and DeCastro for a second. His last 2 fights, he lost to Danilo Marquez, where Danilo Marquez did not land a punch. He lost a 15-minute decision just on kicks. And then he lost to who did he lose to last night? Dennis Gustov, or however you say his Denise Gustov. He got knocked out in 18 seconds, setting the record for the PFL. Jeez, poor Jorgen de Castro, the pride and joy of Cape Verde. All right, sorry, what fight are we talking about? Oh, Justin Tafa versus Austen Lane. Justin Tafa, southpaw. I mean, he's humongous heavyweight. He's as big on as they are on the roster. I mean, he's got to cut down to make heavyweight. Definitely a boxer. I'd say he's got pretty fast hands for heavyweight. I love his uppercut. He's got some serious big power. His last knockout, the step back left hand, was a thing of beauty. He also landed a high kick against Harry Hunsucker. I'll say this about Tafa. Like, I don't know how his UFC run will finish. Like, I definitely don't. I mean, we haven't seen him improve his ground game at all, but like his knockouts are fantastic though. Like the highs of his UFC career are really fun. Now he has a lot of defensive flaws, lacks head movements, kind of ducks behind his forearms. You know, he can be a little too aggressive. Been knocked out by a guy like Jorgen de Castro, but I mean, his ground game is bad. I mean, in fairness, last time we saw someone try to take him down, Harry Hunsucker, he was able to get behind, and he almost got a submission in that. So I'll give him credit for that. Now, Austen Lane, he's the opposite. He's not a very big heavyweight. Like, I mean, he's not small or anything, but he's not. When I was watching film of him this week, I'm like, wow, he's actually smaller than I remembered. Like, for some reason, I thought he was a giant too, and he's not.
Well, he's tall, but yeah, he's not heavy.
But what is he weighing at?
He weighs in around 230, 240.
Okay, so and like, yeah, so he's like, you know, about average heavyweight, but yeah, probably because he's tall, you know, and he obviously has the frame isn't as like, you know, the size and the muscles. I thought he was a monster, probably because he doesn't he have like a football background too?
No, that was the other guy that Hardy beat on the contender.
Oh, it was another guy.
Tabaris Gordon, yeah.
Yeah, I always mix up guys who had like, you know, I think a guy like Eric Anders. I just assumed like someone like that would have a football background, but I don't think they ever mentioned anything about it. Or
yeah, I mean,
Derek Brunson. I'm not joking. Derek Brunson. Who's the other? Ovin St. Preux. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Anders. He probably played at like some small college, and the UFC doesn't even bother mentioning it.
Yeah, probably that team that Ohio State beat 17-7 instead of 70. Yeah. So Lane, he's not very big, but he's pretty athletic. Like, he moves. But that's probably why I thought he was a football player. Maybe. You know, he's raw though on the feet. Like, he's not a very technical boxer. It's more just like, I'm a good athlete. He drops his hands. He keeps his chin high in the air. He does throw a lot of kicks. He throws some teep kicks, but you know, a lot of his kicks are naked, leaving him up for counter. I haven't seen much of his wrestling, but I've seen his defense wrestling. It's kind of weak. You go back to like the contender series. He was mounted in the contender series, and but when he ended up top, he had some really mean ground and pound. I mean, he actually got the knockout from the ground and pound. Perhaps Lane has, you know, more of a ground game than I know of, and I'm thinking that's definitely, he's got to know that's the best avenue of victory for him is to try to take Tafa down. But I'm gonna go the other way. I know that Tafa can crack. So I say Lane throws a naked leg kick and Tafa just times it perfectly and just cleans him up. So I say he does very early. I say he puts Lane out in the very first. I'll say the first minute of the first round.
Man, I know that disagreement on at least on a lot of preview and prediction type shows is what really fuels the masses, but we're not disagreeing on much here. Tafa, he is still a limited heavyweight. I asked it rhetorically when I was introducing these guys, but I really do think Tafa's recent success is just a matter of him kind of finding his spot against the worst heavyweights in the UFC. Tafa will go 500, and when he wins, he's gonna knock them into next week. It's like he's built and looks like Mark Hunt, but he only has one thing Mark Hunt has: which is like a massive right hand. And honestly, you mentioned the kind of like step back hook that he knocked out Porter with is a very Mark Hunt type thing. Just he doesn't have any of the rest of it. Like Mark Hunt's just weird instinctive survivability on the ground, the actually extremely subtle and effective defense on the feet that Hunt had for a lot of his career. Tafa doesn't have any of that. He's just a big slugger. I think that's going to be enough against Lane. Lane is tall, aggressive, leaves his chin out there. He's just waiting to get clocked by Tafa. And I think that you might have called it. I'm not confident enough to say within the first minute, but I think it's very likely it comes off of an ill-advised leg kick, and Tafa just comes right over the top and puts Lane out. Give me Tafa by first round knockout here as well. Third from the top on the UFC 293 main card, at least as the card is set up as of now, is a flyweight matchup between Manel Kape and Felipe dos Santos. Kape, the 29-year-old Angolan, is 18-6 overall. He is 3-2 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Ryzen flyweight champ. He got off to a rough start, dropping his first two fights by decision, though to his credit, they were both against contenders, and in one case your champ, as Alexandre Pantoja and Matheus Nicolau were the ones who handed him those losses. Since then, he is perfect and has frankly looked pretty damn impressive with wins over Ode Osborne, Jalga Zhumagulov, and David Dvorak. The Osborne win was somewhat marred by Kape having missed weight and then lacking the presence of mind not to ask for a bonus afterwards, but he's looked good in the cage. And the Dvorak win was in December, so he's coming in off of about an 8-month layoff. He had been scheduled to take on Kai Kara-France in what was going to be, frankly, the most intriguing fight on the whole card. But Kai Kara-France took a concussion in training on the 21st of August, so Dos Santos will make his UFC debut on 12 days' notice, and it'll be on a pay-per-view main card against one of the best fighters in the division. Do not envy him, but here he comes. 22-year-old Brazilian is 7-0 with one no contest overall. He comes in on a 3-fight win streak. Despite his win streak and despite being technically undefeated as a professional, he is an overwhelming underdog here. No surprise there. Kape is minus 350, Dos Santos plus 275. Keith, much as I would love to ask you how Kai Kara-France could solve the Manel Kape puzzle, I instead have to ask you how Felipe dos Santos can solve the puzzle and what kind of upside he will have after he fails to do so.
Yeah, good luck. He's fun. I mean, he's going to bring the action. He won't back that out, I'll tell you that. But I mean, this is hell of a test, and I mean, Kape's probably one key victory away from getting a title shot. You know, especially after the whole Moreno-Figueiredo 4-fight thing is over. And I understand that Moreno's not the champion anymore. But I'm just saying, like, yeah, they're probably trying to stay away from Figueiredo, so one less guy. Kape is a huge flyweight. I've compared him to the past. I still stick to this. That he reminds me of like a prime Takanori Gomi, where he can fight at both stances. He drops his hands and wings, you know, hard power shots, relying on his head move to get out of the way. His hands are fast, explosive. He really sits on his punches. One of the biggest power punches in the division, and one of the biggest power punches in all of MMA. He's got some good kicks to the body too, and the calves. He'll toss up a fast high kick. He showed he can wrestle against like Pantoja. He showed against like Oka Sasaki and Matheus Nicolau that if you take him down, he can struggle to get back up. Like that's a big concern. Move over to Felipe dos Santos. Super athletic, insanely aggressive. He's a high volume, wild man brawler on the feet, fast hands. When he stays control, he has a nice jab. He's got a good, follow up right cross. He hits hard, but he overthrows his shots, which leaves him open to counters because he's just on the gas. He loves flying knees. He loves spinning attacks. He's very exciting. He's got great teep kicks, But the big problem with him is he's so hittable, extremely hittable. He stands tall with his chin high in the air. He has so many defensive issues. One, he just jumps into range with his chin high in the air, which is a problem. I was watching one fight where he got hurt to the body. He can wrestle. He'll constantly look for takedowns. He more like dives into the takedowns, which he needs to improve his top control. He's a little too wild. He'll lose position trying to be on the offense, but he's a weak defensive wrestler. His aggressive style like leads him right into his opponent just dropping down in timing, like a reactionary double, and he struggles to get off the bottom. But to his credit, he's got incredible cardio. I mean, he fights like a wild man and doesn't slow down, even considering he wrestles. Dos Santos is a really, really fun fighter. Like he's got to be as fun as anybody on the roster. Definitely, usually add two flyweights to fight each other. It's always exciting, but this guy's like got to leave an extra on it. The problem is Kape just isn't the guy that you fight reckless against. If you come forward, dropping your hands chin high in the air, throwing bombs, you got to get cracked. I say Dos Santos runs right into a big, massive shot from Kape, and I say Kape knocks him out, and I say he does in the very first round.
I've got little to add here. You basically ran down all of my points. The Dos Santos is a exhilaratingly reckless fighter on the feet who it's not completely without a plan. He's a whirling dervish, but the things he's throwing have power behind them and a certain amount of technique, but he's heedless on defense, and he's the kind of fighter that I feel like I just go to this well every time we do a preview. Someone who has gotten by on the regional level just because he's such a better athlete and so much more aggressive than his opponents. He's just literally overwhelmed them. You can see it in all the tape on his opponents. It's over usually fast, and if it does last more than a couple minutes, his opponents are just bewildered the whole time. But as you said, those defensive lapses, the offense at all costs approach is the absolute wrong game plan to bring in against Kape, because Kape, I like the Gomi comparison. I like that a lot. In terms of the actual skills that he uses, I think Gomi is probably the best comparison. I'm just going to throw a sprinkle of Jose Aldo in there because Kape is blindingly fast and powerful when he decides to strike, but he's deliberate in deciding when. You look at his best highlight in the UFC so far is starching Ode Osborne. Obviously, he blew weight by a ton, but putting that aside,
and then call for a title shot,
call for a bonus, and then Tyson said, "You literally can't have a bonus, and nobody's going to give you a title shot when you blow weight by 4 pounds." Yeah. But you look at the nuance that went into it. He hurt Osborne. He had hurt Osborne with the same right-handed counter a couple of times, and he noticed that Osborne was in get it back mode. So he hits him with it one more time, backs up. Osborne comes crashing forward. Kape stops on a dime, launches the knee from hell. That kind of strategy and forethought is the difference between Kape's madness on the feet and that of someone like Dos Santos. And I completely agree with you. Dos Santos could catch Kape, obviously. He's a fast, powerful guy. Kape isn't perfect defensively. So there's always the outside chance that he could shock the world. But the much, much more likely outcome is that Kape is not fazed by the aggression and measures him for something nasty. Give me Kape by first round knockout, and my guess would be that unless something wild happens in the main event, it's probably one of your performances of the night, and maybe it grabs one of those two no matter what. But yeah, Kape by first round knockout as well. The co-main event of UFC 293 is a heavyweight matchup between Tai Tuivasa and Alexander Volkov. Tuivasa, the 30-year-old Australian, is 14-5 overall. He is 8-5 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight losing streak. Back-to-back losses to Cyril Gane and Sergey Pavlovich, both by knockout. Prior to that, he'd been on a 5-fight win streak that had propelled him from a likable curiosity to a legitimate top 10, if not top 5 contender for a brief moment, as he capped off that 5-fight win streak with a resounding knockout of Derek Lewis. But now the pendulum has swung back the other way. He is going to be very interested in not embarking on his second 3-fight losing streak of his UFC run. But to avoid that, he's going to have to get past Volkov. The 34-year-old Russian is 36-10 overall. He is 10-4 since joining the UFC out of a pretty respectable global run that saw him win the Bellator and M1 heavyweight titles. He is currently on a 2-fight win streak, both of them first-round TKOs over Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Alexander Romanov. So he's looking to go on a 3-fight streak just as much as Tuivasa is looking not to. Volkov is the one favored to get his way here. He is minus 200, Tuivasa plus 170. Tuivasa is one hell of a streaky fighter.
Yeah.
Since he's been in the UFC, he has a 3-fight win streak, a 3-fight losing streak, a 5-fight win streak, a 2-fight losing streak. And it's tempting to think, well, Tuivasa is what he is, and just the competition keeps rising or dropping to meet him.
Sure.
But he gets matched surprisingly savagely by the UFC. When he's winning fights, they move him up the ladder in a sensible fashion.
Yeah.
The ghost of Stefan Struve, Harry Hunsucker, Greg Hardy, Augusto Sakai, Derek Lewis. But when he's losing, they keep matching him harder. You lose to Cyril Gane, that's why they give you Sergey Pavlovich.
Yeah.
His other losing streak, the ghost of Junior Dos Santos, Blagoy Ivanov, Sergey Spivak. And granted, at the time, Spivak was not Spivak yet.
Still, that's a murderer's row right there.
You would think the UFC would be invested in putting this guy over. He's the shoey guy.
Dude, you know I'd put him against if I was matchmaking. Well, first of all, I'd have a better card than this if I was a matchmaker. But I'd have him like opening the card against the Huggy Bear guy.
Yeah, Chris Barnett. Throw him in there.
Barnett.
Yeah. Sure, because if Barnett can pull off a wheel kick on Tai Tuivasa and knock him out, well, then you've got a star over there. Otherwise, Tuivasa is getting 9,000 gallons of beer rained on him as he marches around the arena.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Instead, they give him Alexander Volkov, the nullifier. Because not only is Volkov going to beat this guy, he's going to beat him in a grueling, ugly fight. He's going to kick Tuivasa in the gut so many times that his liver and maybe one of his kidneys are going to be coming out of his butthole by the end of this fight.
Yeah.
This is
doing the shoe the other way. His shoe's going to reverse.
This is going to look like the Volkov versus Lewis fight without the last 15 seconds. Because up until that point, Volkov had completely frustrated Lewis. It had been kind of a boring, ugly fight, and there had been precious little indication that Lewis was going to uncork a Lewis moment. I think that's what this fight is going to look like. The only way Tuivasa has really improved across his UFC run is that he's gotten in better physical condition. He is a Mark Hunt disciple. Tafa's a Mark Hunt disciple. I got my squat Polynesians mixed up. But Tuivasa, he's cut from that mold. He's never going to have a 6-pack. But he is in better physical condition.
6-pack bear.
Yeah. More like a 12-pack.
Yeah, sure.
He's no longer the guy where you ask, does Tai Tuivasa train? He clearly trains, and he's still just 30. It is kind of remarkable to me that these guys are only 30 and 34 respectively. They feel like they should be 34 and like 39. Just Volkov has just done so much. But Tuivasa, I take that back. He's developed a few more weapons than just his overhand. Because before, he would have some feints, but just was constantly trying to set up the big overhand kill shot. Against Lewis, he showed, okay, no, I've developed other in-close weapons. The elbow he used to ice Lewis was a thing of beauty. I just don't imagine that he's going to have the opportunity to try to do that against Volkov. Because unless you're Curtis Blades, and you have maybe the best double leg and single leg shot in the history of the heavyweight division, or you're Tom Aspinall, Volkov is still incredibly tough to get inside on. He is a titanic guy, and he's one of those rare tall and long heavyweights who's actually good at using his height. He's the anti-Stefan Struve. Stefan Struve was 7 feet tall, and he spent half of his UFC career getting knocked out by like 5'11" guys with huge overhands. Volkov is not that guy. He has decent footwork for a guy as big as he is. He has a decent jab, and he has a very good push kick up the front that doesn't just stop the forward momentum, but makes the guy not want to try that again. I think this is basically down to Tuivasa's best hope is really to catch Volkov in a moment of inattention, like he did against Lewis. Otherwise, the only other best hope is that the judges hear the crowd overreacting to every good thing that Tuivasa does and booing Volkov and get really confused about the scores. That's not beyond the realm of possibility, but I'm not betting on it. Give me Volkov to beat Tuivasa here in, just a kind of a 30-27 washing. But if Tuivasa starts to flag and Volkov decides to turn up the jets, he's coming into this off of back-to-back first-round knockouts, and he's shown himself a little more aggressive recently. I could see Volkov getting a stoppage in the second half of the fight if he starts wearing out Tuivasa with body work, but I'm just going to say one-sided decision.
What a weird fight. It doesn't feel like a co-main event to pay-per-view to me. The whole like getting tougher matchups and all that like makes no sense. Let's get to the skills of these guys. Tuivasa, we've talked about this before. He's surprisingly athletic for his like big body frame. Mm-hmm. He's got some fast hands. He throws a lot of power shots, though he has been more patient. I talked about the Chael Sonnen when he was breaking down film on him, saying that he's starting to measure his shots more. I totally agree. He can crack. I mean, you saw what he did to Derek Lewis. And that was before it was easy to knock out Derek Lewis. He's got thudding calf kicks. He's been hurt a lot. You know, I go back to like Ciryl Gane hurt him. Greg Hardy hurt him. Like go back to Junior Dos Santos hurt him. Sergey Pavlovich, even though he knocked out GDS, but like Sergey Pavlovich, they all hurt him, which is concerning. Now, he started to wrestle a little bit. And he showed some takedown defense against Stefan Struve, which was good. Though he did get hit with the slowest headlock in history against Sergey Spivak. So that's not something to get excited about. He has struggled to get off the bottom. And with all the damage I talked about, you got to stop worrying about his chin. You know, Volkov, I mean, he's obviously massive dude. He's nearly 7 feet tall, and besides just being tall, he's thick. Like he's not just this skinny thing. He's got some size on him. He's a very good striker, very accurate, nice jab, throw straight shots down the pipe, accurate. I said accurate for some reason. He loves teep kicks, which obviously is such a smart move for him. If you get inside, he uses movement well to get back out of range. Just touches and then unloads power shots when he has an opening. You know, other than like Derek Lewis blasting him and Tom Aspinall, a lot of people believe is going to be, future champ. I know he didn't knock him out like that, like out cold. He's shown a really solid chin. He's a weak defensive wrestler. Like go back to like Curtis Blades was able to take him down like a gazillion times in their 5-round fight. And got smoked on the ground by Tom Aspinall. You know, that's definitely the path of victory. The problem is that's not Tuivasa's path of victory. You mentioned it. You said, the only people who beats guys like Volkov is a powerful wrestler, Curtis Blades, or like the other people who beats that level is like the elite athletes, just Ciryl Gane, Tom Aspinall is the guy that look like they could be future champions. Tuivasa is neither. I keep picturing, Volkov finishing Tuivasa. You mentioned teep kick. I just keep visioning the same way, like just keep teep kicks up the middle, and I think he finishes in the second round. Give me Volkov by second round TKO. I'm going to throw out one more game. Like this is not a gambling show, so if this is your first time listening, don't expect this all the time. But -200, I love Volkov at -200. Like I expect him to be like -350, 370, something like that. So, and -200, give me that.
Totally co-sign. The underdog's routes to victory are just not things that are commonly done.
It's landed big. It's landed big haymaker. It's that Derek Lewis Hail Mary at the end. Like, he could land that. So I get why it's. Well, I still think it's be bigger, but like, I understand why they don't want to give too much because a heavyweight can always end it with one shot, but I just don't think it happens.
That brings us to the main event of UFC 293, a middleweight title fight between defending champ Israel Adesanya and challenger Sean Strickland. Adesanya, the 34-year-old Nigerian-born New Zealander, is 24-2 overall. He is 13-2 in the UFC. He is 13-1 at middleweight. He is coming into this fight off of a win. He knocked out his nemesis, Alex Pereira, in April in the main event of UFC 287, winning back the middleweight belt that he had lost to Pereira last November at UFC 281, and finally getting a win in their multi-fight, multi-discipline series. For the first defense of his new title reign, it appeared that he was going to be taking on surging South African Dricus du Plessis, to the point that the two of them had a frankly uncomfortable exchange in the cage after du Plessis' last win. That was never made official, and what was made official back on August 8th was Strickland as the next title challenger. Strickland, 32-year-old fighting out of Southern California, is 27-5 overall. He is 14-5 in the UFC. He is 7-2 since moving up from welterweight. He has mostly fights at middleweight, a couple of 190, 195-pound catch weight. So he is 7-2 above welterweight. He is on a 2-fight win streak since losing back-to-back fights. He lost back-to-back fights to Pereira and Jared Cannonier, a former champ and former title challenger. He's gotten back on track this year with a decision win over Nasruddin Imavov in January and a second-round knockout of Abus Magomedov in July. That was good enough to get him a shot at the title, where he's not favored to win it. I have two questions for you, Keith. Obviously, Adesanya is the favorite.
Okay.
Make a guess at what Adesanya is as the favorite. Just guess the
He's
first.
He's got to be huge.
Guess the first digit of the line.
3.
Israel Adesanya is minus 500. Sean Strickland plus 350.
Wow.
That's question number one. Question number two, against either of these guys, does Bo Nickel get the first round finished, or does he have to wait to the second round for the attrition to start to rack up?
I think Strickland makes it the second.
Makes sense.
But Bo. People think I'm crazy. I think Bo is Adesanya right now. I know I'm not. That's not me being funny and doing a stick. Like, I'm being dead serious. I think he beats him. I think Chimaev beats him. And I'm an Izzy guy. Like, I'm a huge Izzy guy.
Yeah, yeah. For those who are relatively new to the Shillen and Duffy previews, Israel Adesanya, I believe, is still Keith's single favorite fighter to do tape study on. If not, he's in the top 3.
Yeah, he's up there. He's definitely up there. It's one of those ones, like, when I'm doing the tape study on people, I change my mind. Yeah, but he's the first person I've said that about.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Volkanovski's a good one, and Max Holloway's a good one too.
I was going to say those three. And honestly, Sean O'Malley is really fun.
Up there. I'm sure we weren't doing the show when DJ was rating, but DJ would have been up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those.
Yeah. At any rate, Strickland, you mentioned, I mentioned jokingly, and you mentioned seriously that you would like Nickel's chances against Adesanya. That is kind of fitting because Strickland's wrestling might be his best avenue to victory here. Strickland presents as a kickboxer. Specifically,
sure,
he presents as a kickboxer who prefers punching to kicking. His jab is his single best weapon on the feet. I think he has one of the best jabs in that division. Yeah. One, because he's willing to throw the thing. Two,
constantly.
Yeah, constantly. And when he gets into the flow, he's willing to throw to different speeds. He's willing to throw it to the body as well as upstairs. He's he's willing to use, he uses it to try to set up other things. Like he starts mixing in, his cross, but always in his back pocket is that, well, even though Strickland looks like a cross between every British fighter in the UFC in 2008, he looks like a cross between Michael Bisping, Paul Kelly, and Terry Edom. He is American, and he is an underratedly good wrestler. And that's something that is carried over when he chooses to use it to 185 and even 195 pound matchups. He's not a particularly undersized guy at middleweight. So the question is, will he try to test his luck on the feet against Adesanya for extended periods, or is he going to look for opportunities to get takedowns immediately? But even if he does, and even if his wrestling is better than most people give him credit for, he isn't Bo Nickel. He isn't Robert Whittaker, probably, from an offensive wrestling standpoint. He isn't Yoel Romero or Kelvin Gastelum. He's probably around Marvin Vettori level. He might be better than Vettori as an offensive wrestler.
That's probably about fair.
He's a better technical wrestler than Jan Blachowicz, but Blachowicz is way bigger. So my thought is, even if Strickland comes in with the right game plan, even if he says, okay, I'm not doing that shit I did against Alex Pereira anymore. I need to get this fight to the ground. I don't think there's a guarantee that he's going to be able to do it. Everybody has known on some level that they don't want to dance with Israel Adesanya, but the number of people that have either gotten him to the ground and kept him there, or have at least threatened with it enough to slow down what he does on the feet are relatively few, considering, again, this is Adesanya's 16th fight in the UFC. How many people were able to really wrestle successfully against him? Like, I don't know if Strickland can do it. Yeah,
I think Vettori took him down once in that first fight, I think.
Yeah, and Vettori took him down once in the first fight, and I feel as though what success he had on the feet kind of fed off that. Like, it was really early in Adesanya's career as well, and he didn't have the bulletproof confidence he had 5 or 10 fights later. It's why that fight was close, even if no, it wasn't a robbery. Yes, Adesanya clearly won. So it's, I said this last week about the Paris card. I think I said it the week before about the Singapore card. Anytime we have a line that's minus 500, minus 700, ridiculous lines, I start from the opposite direction. Okay, what's it look like if the underdog wins? None of them are plausible. Strickland taking down Adesanya in 3 rounds out of 5 and doing enough work on the ground not to get stood up as the crowd is just booing the shit out of the groundwork. I'm not picking that. And Strickland jabbing and 1-2ing maybe the best striker in MMA history.
I think he is.
Yeah. And I say that knowing football. Yeah, he got knocked out by Alex Pereira, but the whole body
knocked him out the next fight.
Yeah. And like the whole body of work, it's probably Adesanya. Strickland, I
think it's not him, it's Anderson Silva.
Yep. There you go.
That's it. There's your 2 options.
Strickland just, he doesn't even have the lightning in a bottle, shock the world type thing. Like, he's never demonstrated flattening one-shot power. He's never demonstrated, like, he's a good topside grappler when he takes someone down. Like, he sets up in their guard. He knows to throw enough strikes to keep from getting stood up if he wants to stay down there. But he's not as soon as they hit the ground, Strickland's on his back. He's already got both hooks in. 10 seconds later, Adesanya is blood shooting out of his nose and he's tapped. That's not Sean Strickland either. I'm not saying this is going to be boring, because the crowd is going to blow the roof off this place, but I do think this is going to be a showcase for Israel Adesanya. This card has quite a few matchups where I think the UFC is doing its best to make reasonable pairings while serving the crowd and the local fighters just a little bit. Here's one where they made arguably the best title fight they could make, and it's going to come off like a showcase. Give me Israel Adesanya to absolutely style on Sean Strickland here. And by the time they get into the cage, Strickland is like all of Strickland's best shots and knockout blows are going to be landed on the mic during the week. Adesanya can dish it out on the mic. He does not like to take it. Like, look how he just completely fell apart as Dricus du Plessis just kind of got in his face, and du Plessis was smiling and kind of having fun with it, and Adesanya lost his mind. I think Strickland is going to have Adesanya well and truly pissed off by the time they get in the cage, but I don't think that's going to lead to a Aldo versus McGregor thing. I think it's going to turn Adesanya into just a cold-blooded assassin. Give me Adesanya to knock out Sean Strickland in the third round, and we'll argue that he could have knocked him out in the second, or maybe somebody should have stopped this thing. But this is going to be savage.
Yeah, this is a real uphill climb for Strickland, that's for sure. I mean, is he? You said it, and I'm gonna double down again. I think he's the greatest striker in MMA history. It's not him, it's Anderson Silva, and I understand that it might be people more decorated, but when I'm talking about the body of work in MMA, you know, and he's 1 or 2 wins away from being the GOAT at middleweight. I know that sounds like absurd to say, but to defend the title, I know he lost it, but he went back. To have these many title defenses over who he's doing at this time in MMA is incredible. I mean, he's going to be the GOAT there until Bo Nickel takes the crown from him. He's a long and lengthy striker. He fights just as good from southpaw as he is in the orthodox stance. Flows effortlessly between the two. Great footwork, very poised and patient, constantly lining up his foot to give him the straight shots with a perfect alignment for his counters and everything. Fights, yeah, I've said this before, he fights a lot like John Jones and Anderson Silva and Peter Yan, where he's a bit of a slow starter, but it's just because he's setting traps, seeing what you're doing. Good at changing up the tempo so you don't time him up. Great at hand fighting and moving his opponents to spots where he wants them to be so he can land the shots that he wants. He understands distance so well and finds distance by the grabbing of the hands, uses feints to set up his opponents to see how they react. I mean, it's been a while, but I always go back to that first Robert Whittaker fight where he was feinting and just freezing Whittaker with the feints. Quick hands, extremely accurate. I mean, he's got some slack for some of the slower, methodical wins over like Yoel Romero and Jarek Cannonier, but people forget like the destruction in big fights he's had. Derek Brunson, the first Rob Whittaker fight, Paulo Costa. He was having a lot of success in the first fight against Alex Pereira. He's very defensively sound, good head movement, rolls with punches, so he can land clean himself. Zaps some of the power. He doesn't get enough credit for his one punch power. I mean, he starts Paulo Costa, he starts Robert Whittaker in their first fight, and then obviously what he just did to Alex Pereira, even when he was hurt, though he was kind of going back to rolling with the punches and zapping some of the power to land the accuracy to see it, to land it, to execute it, and have the power. I mean, it was incredible knockout. I don't think he gets enough credit for it. A lot of people think it's more like a throwing up a Hail Mary kind of thing, and it wasn't. He saw it.
As your daughter once said, other fighters hope and pray, he aims at
she made that up. Yeah. He mixes punches and kicks together well. He's got a very big, large kicking game, such dexterity in his hips. He throws kicks up so easily. I love his question mark kick that he just wraps around his opponent's defense. Good Muay Thai clinch game. He sweeps in there. I think he's an underrated grappler. I don't think he gets enough credit. He's not good, but he's not nearly as bad as people think he is. He does need to improve his takedown defense, but he isn't he isn't Blood Diamond on the ground. He's not winning jiu-jitsu tournaments like that, but he's not terrible. Now Strickland's a technically sound striker. I mean, he starts off a little slow, similar, trying to set traps, but he's a builder. He lifts his output, but he also seems to build his confidence as the fight goes on. He constantly taking the ground. It's worked a lot. I mean, that's what happened in his last fight against Magomedov there. But that also walks him into stuff. I mean, go back to the Alex Pereira, we just walked right into a big shot from Pereira. He's got one of the best jabs. You mentioned it. It's not a stiff jab. It's just staying out there, doing what it's supposed to do. He follows up that with a straight like down the pipe. So he is a very basic 1-2 striker. Keeps everything tight inside. He doesn't overextend on his shots, which is really good. Not many tells. He can sting, but he definitely is not a power hitter. He's more of like a cumulative striker, as you know, hurt you more as the fight goes on. I mean, he admitted it himself that he's not a power punch. He even joked about it, you know, in the past. Good kicking game. He likes kicks to the body, likes kicks to the legs. Though he is open to leg kicks himself. He will battle in the clinch, but he doesn't wrestle much. When he does, I mean, he's got takedowns. He got 4 takedowns against Uriah Hall. That's probably his best performance when it comes to wrestling. But he got a takedown against somebody else he recently fought. He got 1 or 2 takedowns. I'm trying to think. He took Jared Cannonier down, who's a pretty good wrestler. He took down Imavov. So I mean, he wrestles more than people think he does. And he's hard to take down too. He's got a very strong sprawl and ball takedown defense. So as far as prediction goes, I mean, Strickland's only prayer is to wrestle. It's to wrestle. You said, how can he win? He's going to have to turn this into a wrestling match. You mentioned that other guys more decorated or at least equal in skill hasn't been able to use that strategy against Strickland other than Jan Blachowicz, who was much, much bigger than Israel Adesanya. Yeah, I agree. Like you always ask, how does he win? I don't necessarily think he has to get the takedowns. I think he can, if he can just close the distance, press Izzy against the cage, drain on him that way, shoulder bump him, stomp on his feet, just make it kind of boring, slow, get the lactic acid in Izzy's arms and just slowly kind of grind on him and get Izzy to gas. I think that's his best way. Like get him to gas and then like kind of up the volume when Izzy's completely gassed. Maybe that's probably his best avenue of victory, winning like 3 rounds of 2 or something like that. I just with you, man. I think this is going to be a clinic. I think this is a terrible stylistic matchup for Strickland. If he wins, it won't be Sarah GSP level upset. I mean, that was a reality show winner beaten. You know, that time was probably ranked pound for pound best fighter in the world.
It'll be Grasso Shevchenko level.
That's what I was going to say. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Like
we've been doing this too long, brother.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible to do it. It's just going to have one of those moments. It's going to have Joe Rogan going like doing the looking around like, wow, did that happen? And John Anik screaming on his top of the lung and DC screaming. It could have like when Rose first beat Ioana type level where it was like, it's possible. No one expected it. Julian Pena, Manny Nunes won. Like it's possible to happen. Obviously, I mean, that's such a cop out. Like I'm doing it myself. Like it's such a anything can happen to me. Yeah, of course it can. This is why it's the best sport in the world. That's why Appalachian State beats Michigan and stuff like that. You know, it happens. I'm not betting on it. Like as much as those happen, the absolute beatdowns happen too. And I just think this is going to be one of those Izzy clinics. Izzy knocks him out, does something like disrespectful over his body, you know, with the arrows or something. You know, Izzy's thinking he has something that Strickland said that he's going to use against him. You know,
Strickland's going to give him plenty of ammunition.
Oh yeah. He'll say something like, "You're going to stiff my crotch," and then Izzy will put his dick in his face or some shit. I don't know. Excuse my language to the female listeners, but I think Izzy does it early. I think he knocks him on the. I want to say first round, but I think he might hurt him a little bit and then finishes him in the second. Give me Izzy by second round knockout.
All right. And the next thought, in my mind, after that, if it plays out anything like you and I have predicted, are Dricus du Plessis is the only top 15
it has to be
middleweight in the UFC that Adesanya hasn't fought already and is coming off a win.
I know Izzy is talking like he's moved on from du Plessis, like kind of you lost your opportunity. The problem is there's nobody else, and I think, and obviously I know there's way more logistics. I know it's easy for me to stand back and say, you know, just do it in Africa. Like I understand that that's easy for me to say, but do that shit in Africa. Like put it right in I don't know. Wait, I know there's no arena. I don't know. Make it happen. Put it outside. Do something.
I mean,
I would try to have Izzy doing the Ali moment as much as possible, walking through I apologize if this is the wrong term, but the village of, and with having a whole bunch of young black kids running with him and hugging him, and it's like he's coming home. You need that moment with the whole, with Ali was walking through for George Foreman.
What they could have, should have done with Francis Ngannou a bunch of times and never dropped the ball.
But Izzy has that personality. You could do it with Izzy.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know a lot of people what it's not like it is. We're this is more of the recap show.
Yeah.
But yeah, it Strickland could ruin everything. I just don't expect it.
That is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 293, Adesanya versus Strickland. I've been Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Schillen. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you've enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you a mix of actual deep analysis, serious predictions, and the occasional humorous or historical aside. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section. We're both pretty good about reading and responding. We'd love to hear your take on these fights. Most importantly, join us for the recap. We're live on the Sherdog YouTube page, usually about 10 or 15 minutes after the main event, where we will talk about this card in reverse order, starting from the headliner all the way down to the first prelim, discussing what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you, because the live chat is open that whole time. So we are reading your comments on the air, putting them up on the screen, taking your questions, comments, and hot takes in real time.